Chapter 1582. There's such a thing. Meg looked at Raina in shock. I should have settled this matter myself, but they. Raina lowered her eyes guiltily. Are they from the Marquis family? Meg frowned. Yes, they said the shop belongs to them, and they won't let us in. Firis nodded angrily. Isn't the property deed with you? Why did they say the shop belongs to them? Meg asked Raina. They also have a certificate from the City Lord's castle. It says that the shop belongs to the Marquis family. I went to the City Lord's castle with the certificate today, but they didn't give me an accurate explanation. They only told me to come back and wait. Raina looked up at Meg with a determined gaze, and said, I will settle this through an appeal. I believe in the City Lord's castle and Chaos City's laws. I believe in them too. Meg smiled gently. He looked at Raina's hand, and said coldly, however, since the City Lord's castle is still unclear, and both parties have proof, they took over the restaurant and hurt you. This is not right. It's just a small cut. It's okay. Raina shook her head. She was already used to small cuts, and didn't take it to heart. However, Meg's attitude warmed her heart, but she didn't want to trouble him. This was what she should do. Let's go in first. Princess Irina should be here too. Let her take a look at your wound. If there's anything, we can talk after dinner. Meg went up to open the restaurant's door, and gestured for Raina and Firis to enter. The princess is back too. Phyllis's eyes lit up, and she quickly walked into the restaurant. Soon, she heard her greeting Irina. Raina followed in, and greeted everyone. Meg introduced Hannah, who had just arrived. Then, he looked at Irina, who was rubbing Ugly Duckling's chubby face, and said, Princess Irina, please take a look at Raina's hand. Raina's hand? Everyone turned to look at Raina. Big sister Raina, what's wrong? Did some baddies bully you? Amy went up, and looked at Raina with concern. She clenched her little fists, and said, if there is, tell me. I'll beat them up for you. Some baddies took over Raina's shop when no one was around. Phyllis told everyone about how the Marquis family took over the shop. Those baddies. Everyone was a little angry when they heard that, but they also looked at Raina with heartache. It's okay. Look, it's just a small wound. Raina removed the bandage on her hand, and revealed the wound on her palm. The wound was about 2 centimeters long. It wasn't deep, but it was a little red and swollen at the moment. A scab hadn't formed yet, and it hurt just by looking at it. You're still experimenting with the hot pot even though you're injured, right? Meg asked as he looked at the red and swollen wound. I'm just experimenting. I haven't confirmed the taste yet. Raina retracted her hand embarrassedly. Although the wound is small, it hurts a little on the hand. Irina looked at Amy, and said, Amy, didn't you learn the healing spell? That's right. I learned the healing spell of life magic from Big Sister Irina, and I also learned the healing spell of nature magic from Big Sister Luna. If I use them together, the healing effect will be doubled. Amy nodded. She made her way over to Raina with a smile, and said, Big Sister Raina, give me your hand. I'll heal it for you. Raina saw that everyone was looking at her, and hesitated momentarily before extending her hand. Amy took out her wand and held it in her hand. She closed her eyes and began to chant a magic spell. Everyone looked at her curiously. Life magic was a spell unique to the elven race, and nature magic could only be mastered by the druids. However, Amy had learned the healing spell of these two spells at the same time, and she had even created a fusion between them. Everyone was looking forward to seeing if she could really double the healing effect. Following the conclusion of her spell, Amy pointed her wand at Raina's hand. A green light intermingled with wisps of golden light fell onto her hand and enshrouded it. The light disappeared in a flash, and when everyone focused their attention on Raina's hand again, the wound on her hand had already completely healed. There wasn't even a single scar left behind. Even the old scars that she had accidentally gotten from cooking in the past had been completely healed. Raina looked at her left hand with an expression of surprise and incredulity. Wow, Mia's healing spell is super awesome. The wound disappeared in an instant, and there wasn't even a scar left behind, Mia exclaimed in amazement. The fusion of nature magic and life magic is perfect. They really are mutually beneficial. A hint of surprise appeared on Elizabeth's face. Amy really was the most talented magic caster she had ever seen. Looks like the druids and elves really do have an inseparable relationship. I wonder if the god of life and the goddess of nature are related. Meg was also a little curious. He was aware that Amy was learning healing spells. He had been worried that she wouldn't be able to do both at the same time, but who would have thought that not only had she learned them, she had even managed to fuse them together without anyone teaching her. However, she could even fuse ice flames and fire flames for fun, so it wasn't too surprising that she could fuse 2 healing spells together. My wound has been healed, but are we just going to let the guy who beat me off the hook? Irina smiled as she said, I've heard that the 4 major families of Chaos City are extremely wealthy. I wonder if that's true. If we're talking about extremely wealthy families, only the Buffett family can barely be considered as one of them. The Marquis family is also extremely wealthy, but they definitely don't lack money, Meg said with a smile. He was naturally aware of what Irina was thinking. You guys take a rest first. I'll go and cook. After lunch, we'll go and take a look. If we're talking about fists, that'll be interesting. Meg walked towards the kitchen. Of course, he couldn't let this matter go just like that. This shop was Raina's compensation. Since the Marquis family was so shameless, he wasn't going to give in to them. After lunch, the group went out and walked towards the hot pot restaurant 500 meters away. Amy walked at the front with Ugly Duckling in her arms, looking like a big boss. Say, do you think that woman will still come? Young Master told us not to create trouble, but if she wants to barge in, we'll still have to stop her, right? If she doesn't know what's good for her, then don't blame us for being rude. We've already told her that we're from the Marquis family, but she still wants to barge in. She's just a fool, 2 orcs mumbled as they huddled together at the entrance of the hot pot restaurant and huffed to warm their hands. Hey, you 2 baddies. Did you bully big sister Raina? Just then, a soft questioning voice sounded. The 2 orcs turned their heads at the same time when they heard the voice. They were stunned when they saw the little half-elf girl who had appeared at the entrance. Child, who are you? Go home and play with your parents, one of the orcs said impatiently as he waved his hand. Bookhouse reading website. Chapter 1583. Sir. Amy looked at the orc and took a step back. Here, they're all here. The 2 orcs looked up and saw a man standing in front of them with a group of men. They were looking at them with hostility. The woman who had been causing trouble 2 days ago was also in the group. What do you want? The 2 orcs panicked. However, they took a look at Meg. He was a skinny and weak human who didn't look like an expert. They immediately regained their composure and said, This is the property of the Marquis family. Don't think that you can enter just because you have more people. Look at what you're saying. This is Raina's shop. Didn't you take over the place a few days ago because you had more people? Meg laughed sarcastically. Nonsense. Who said that this is her shop? We have the ownership statement from the Department of Property Rights. The ownership of this shop belongs to the Marquis family, the orc said seriously. He took out a piece of parchment paper with the official seal of the City Lord's Castle Property Department and showed it to Meg. He was so proud that his nose was almost pointing to the sky. I also have the property ownership certificate of the shop with the seal of the City Lord's Castle Property Department. If you suspect that my certificate is fake, you can go to the City Lord's Castle to verify it. Meg also showed Raina's property ownership certificate. ChempH. We won't let you in anyway. It's useless no matter what you say. The orc kept the certificate and snorted. Meg also kept the property ownership certificate, and smiled. Very well. Now that we have the certificate, the owner of this shop will depend on whose fist is harder, right? Compete with our fist. The 2 orcs sized up Meg, and laughed at the same time. I say, with your girly body, you want to compete with our fists. One of the orcs looked at Meg, and mocked. Or are you going to let this little girl compete for you? Everyone looked at the 2 orcs as if they were looking at 2 idiots who didn't know what was good for them. There wasn't much anger in them. Is he going to fight? Elizabeth looked at Meg's back. She was sure that Meg wasn't an ordinary chef who only knew how to use a kitchen knife at the Fork tribe. Even Kurt was stabbed by him. Fighting with these two orcs who weren't even 6th tier was like killing two ants. Meg also couldn't help but laugh. He looked at Amy and said, "Since you've chosen Amy, then." Amy. Her. The two orcs were stunned upon hearing that. They looked at Mag, and then carefully sized up the cute half-elf who was holding a kitten in her arms. The little girl appeared to be only 3 or 4 years old, and her eyes were big, and she looked very adorable. "Are you still a human?" the two orcs said in disdain. Amy's eyes lit up. She passed Ugly Duckling to Anna, and smiled at the two orcs. "Don't worry. I'll go easy on you." Meg and the rest had already backed off, and made way for Amy to stand in front of the restaurant. The commotion over here attracted the attention of many passers-by. They were also looking at Mag with disdain. What kind of father would let his young child fight with the orcs? Wasn't he asking his child to smash his head against the wall? Is this a good idea? Raina was a little worried. She wasn't worried that Amy couldn't beat those two orcs. She was just worried that it would bring trouble to the boss and the restaurant if things got out of hand. After all, the Marquis family was still very influential in Chaos City. "It's all right. Even if the City Lord's castle is arguing about this, the Grey Temple won't sit back and do nothing," Meg consoled her with a smile. What are you doing? Even if it's a challenge, what's the big deal about pushing a child out?" an orc said indignantly. "It would be embarrassing even if he won against a 3-year-old. "That's right. You're a big man, but you're hiding at the back and pushing your daughter out. How shameless can you be?" The other orc was also glaring at Meg angrily. He couldn't wait to roll up his sleeves and fight with him. They were guarding the restaurant, and represented the Marquis family. They couldn't embarrass their master. "Hey, I'm your opponent." Master said that even when facing a weak enemy, we have to give them enough attention and respect. "Just like how I'm treating you now," Amy lectured them word by word with a stern face. "You." The orc lowered his head to look at Amy. He was angry and frustrated, but he didn't know how to vent his anger. "Be careful. I'm going to attack." However, before he could say anything, Amy had already whipped out her 2-meter-tall magic caster's staff, and dashed towards them. "Little brat." Although the orc was a little surprised that Amy could lift such a tall magic caster's staff, he didn't take her seriously at all. He casually reached out to grab the magic caster's staff, intending to teach this little brat a lesson. Meanwhile, the other orc stood where he was without any intention of moving at all. It would be too embarrassing if the two of them had to take action to deal with a 3-year-old brat. Bam! With a muffled sound, the orc's fan-like hand failed to grab the magic caster's staff, and the magic caster's staff slammed heavily into his face. The unexpected and terrifying power caused his face to contort instantly. How could she have such terrifying power? That was the only thought in the orc's mind as he was sent flying. Fuck. The orc next to him was shocked when he saw his companion being sent flying with a single hit. He didn't even have time to react. "Hihi, it's your turn." Amy's gaze fell on the orc, and she revealed an adorable smile. "Looks like this little brat isn't simple. She can lift such a heavy magic caster's staff and send Benson flying so far with a single hit." However, this is also because Benson underestimated his opponent too much and didn't make any preparations. Bam! Before the Beastman could complete his mental construction, he was interrupted by a blow to the head. He flew in the same direction as the previous Beastman. How is this possible? The onlookers were in an uproar. They looked at the two orcs that were sent flying with a single slap, and Amy, who didn't even reach the orc's waist, in shock. What kind of great power did this little girl have to be able to send two orcs that weighed more than 100 kilograms flying so easily? Amy looked at the two orcs that were lying on the ground, but she didn't appear too happy. Instead, she lectured them seriously. "Master said that we must focus during a battle and give it our all. We mustn't think too much. Anyway, if we can't beat them, we can't beat them. There's no point in thinking too much, bastard." The two orcs were lying on the ground. Their faces were filled with shame and anger, and their hearts were filled with fear. The terrifying power of the staff just now made them question their lives. They were sent flying with a single slap from a little girl of 3 or 4 years old. You're not convinced? Amy took 2 steps forward and looked at the 2 orcs who were struggling to get up. Then I'll give you one more chance. As she said that, she raised the magic caster's staff in her hand. After reciting a magic spell, a green light mixed with golden light fell on the 2 orcs. Their injuries were healed in the blink of an eye. It's healed. The 2 orcs got up in disbelief. Their minds were still a little dazed. I'm here again, a devilish whisper sounded in their ears. Wonderful Bookhouse. Chapter 1584. The crowd at the shop's entrance was dumbfounded as they watched the 2 orcs being sent flying by Amy, then healed by a ray of light, and sent flying again. Their tragic cries reverberated in the streets, making people feel pity for them and laugh at the same time. After all, the 2 tall and strong orcs were so weak in front of that little girl who looked as cute as a little white rabbit. They were sent flying with a single slap, and even looked like they were putting on a show. Only the people at Immerse knew that those 2 orcs were really miserable. Amy was obviously practicing her healing spell. It was not easy to find such human test subjects with such a high abominable value and thick skin. Every slap was real. It was not enough to kill them, but it was inevitable that they would be unable to move due to the injuries. And the healing spell, which was a combination of life magic and nature magic, was very effective. It could heal their injuries in a very short time, and then she could give the next slap with ease. No! Don't! I surrender. The 2 orcs' screams were prolonged. Their hearts were completely filled with despair at this moment. What kind of child was this? She was obviously a devil incarnate. Although she was holding a magic caster's staff, she was using it as a fire rod, and her strength was so terrifying. Isn't this the little boss of Immerse? She is the disciple of the Lord of Fire and the Lord of Ice. These 2 fellows actually dared to provoke her. A passerby recognized Amy, and couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. So she is the disciple of those 2 legendary magic casters. Everyone understood, and there was a hint of pity in their eyes as they looked at the 2 orcs. When the 2 orcs heard that, their hearts sank. How did they end up in the hands of that great aunt? This was the child that should not be provoked in Chaos City. Are you convinced now? Meg asked with a smile as he looked at the 2 orcs who were sent flying again. I'm convinced. I'm convinced. The 2 orcs nodded like they were pounding garlic. They couldn't care less about the excruciating pain from being sent flying just now. They were afraid that another healing spell would land on them. So fast. Master said that we must have a backbone. We can't surrender just because we are beaten up. Amy hugged her magic caster's staff and looked at the 2 orcs with a look of disappointment. Why don't we fight for a while more? No more. The 2 orcs got up from the ground while enduring the excruciating pain, and waved their hands fearfully. What a joke. Although they could be healed every time, the process of the injury and the pain were completely real. Even if they had bones of steel, they would not be able to. Stop. What are you doing? Right at this moment, a horse-drawn carriage with the Marquis family's emblem stopped in front of the shop. A young man alighted from the horse-drawn carriage, and walked over. He glanced at the 2 orcs who were in a sorry state before looking at Mag with narrowed eyes. These people wanted to barge into the shop and beat us up. You have to uphold justice for us. The 2 orcs looked at Jonah as if they had seen their savior. The grievance they had suffered surged to their hearts, and they spoke with tears and snot. The 7 or 8 orcs who came with the carriage immediately surrounded Meg and Amy. They glared at them and were ready to attack at any time. Jonah looked at Meg and said in a low voice, "You are Mr. Mac from Amy's, right? I hope you can give me an explanation. Why did you hurt the guards of my Marquis family for no reason? And why did you barge into my Marquis family's property for no reason?" For no reason. Meg sneered. He turned to the side to let Raina, who was standing behind him, through. He looked at Jonah and coldly said, "Then let me ask you first. Why did your 2 guards beat up my partner, Miss Raina, for no reason 2 days ago? This is clearly a property under her name, and it has the certificate of ownership stamped by the City Lord's castle as proof. How did it become the property of your Marquis family?" The Marquis family and this lady are fighting over property. They both said that this shop is theirs. Then, who exactly does this shop belong to? Mr. Mack said that Miss Rayner has the certificate of ownership, so this shop must be hers. Isn't this the law of Chaos City? The onlookers started whispering when they heard that. They didn't expect such a dispute to be hidden behind a seemingly random fight. I was the one who beat them up. If you're not convinced, you can come and try. Amy placed her magic caster's staff in front of her, and crossed her arms in front of her chest. She looked at Jonah with disdain, and said, "Come here." Jonah glanced at Amy, and raised his eyebrows. However, he suppressed his anger very quickly. He knew this young lady's identity very well. If those two lords got angry, even the Marquis family would have to tremble. His gaze landed on Meg again. This wasn't his first time seeing Meg. He had already seen him at the Aden Chamber of Commerce's year-end celebration, but this was indeed his first time meeting him face to face. He still hadn't received any accurate information as to why the property of this shop would land in the hands of that lady named Rayner. The Department of Property Rights only knew that this was specially approved by the city lord, and this property was transferred to Rayner's name as a gift. This might have something to do with the Grey Temple. However, the Grey Temple had kept all information about Bennett under wraps, so he didn't get much useful information. However, he could sense that Bennett had committed an unusual crime, and there was no chance for him to turn things around. With his cautious personality, he had gone to look for his father before leaving the house in the morning and suggested giving up the shop to avoid being involved in an unknown conflict in the face of such muddy waters that he had no idea what was going on. However, Bowen didn't accept his suggestion. He wasn't worried at all about Miss Rayner, who didn't seem to have any power or backing. He believed that as long as they waited for the report from the Department of Property Rights, they would be able to rightfully take over this shop. According to the current valuation, this shop was already worth more than 25 million copper coins. Furthermore, if they could follow Bennett's plan and open a hot pot restaurant, they might be able to bring in even better returns for the Marquis family. He didn't expect to bump into Meg and the rest who were there to cause trouble when he was just planning to take a look. Furthermore, the other party was clearly prepared. They were able to pull both parties to the same side just by relying on a 3-year-old girl. If that's the case, on behalf of the Marquis family, I would like to apologize on behalf of the Marquis family for the disrespect and harm that my men had caused to Miss Rayner. Jonah looked at Rayner, and bowed solemnly. Rayner looked at Meg nervously. It's all right. We've already fought back. This is more useful than an apology, Meg answered on behalf of Rayner with a smile. Jonah's expression froze, and he looked at Meg with a serious expression. He had met his match. Meg also looked at Jonah with a spurious smile. The descendants of the 4 major families were indeed not all useless, but he was still too inexperienced to play this game with him. Chapter 1585. Seems like the fight just now was a misunderstanding. The 2 guards from our Marquis family have offended you in any way, and I hope this young lady can forgive them. We will also teach them well, Jonah said to Amy with a smile, displaying the bearing of a rich family's heir. After that, she turned to look at Mag. Her smile faded, and she seriously said, "However, I'm afraid what Mr. Mag said isn't entirely true. I don't know why Miss Rayner has the ownership certificate of this shop in her hands, because this shop originally belonged to the Marquis family. It was under Bennett's name previously, but he was arrested for personal reasons. The Marquis family will not protect or be biased toward him, but we can't let the properties and assets that belong to the Marquis family slip away." Everyone was deep in thought. If that was really the case, how did that Miss Rayner get such a spacious and expensive shop? It was indeed suspicious. You can pretend that you don't know, but I'm going to tell you clearly now. Meg looked at Jonah, and coldly said, Bennett was arrested by the Grey Temple because he was involved in dozens of murders and burials in gambling dens, manufacturing and selling potions, kidnapping, and other vicious crimes. And all his assets were obtained illegally. He used them to buy many shops and properties, and used irregular means to run a few industries that he monopolized in Chaos City. These seemingly clean properties, shops, and tea houses were bought by him using his dirty money. The Marquis family should know very well about their origins, right? Do you think you can fool everyone by saying that they belong to the Marquis family? Do you think the Marquis family is omnipotent, or do you think the Grey Temple is full of fools? You. Jonah's face turned pale, and he took 2 steps back instinctively. He looked at Meg with shock and panic in his eyes. How did he know about all these? During this period, the Marquis family had spent a lot of effort and money to publicize the ownership of these properties and assets to the public, and to sever ties with Bennett. They didn't expect Meg to expose them in public. As expected, there was an uproar among the onlookers. They had only heard that the owner of the Ben Tea House had been arrested, but they didn't expect it to involve such a terrifying crime. As the second master of the Marquis family, Bennett was quite well known. Now that the Marquis family wanted to take away all the properties that he had obtained illegally and claim that they belonged to the Marquis family, they were not only taking advantage of him but also trampling on the Grey Temple's reputation. Me? Am I wrong? I believe the Grey Temple will announce the results of this matter soon. If the Marquis family really has the ability to suppress this matter, then you can say that I'm spouting nonsense. Of course, I know you don't have that ability. Meg smiled and looked at the flustered Jonah. He continued, as for why the property deed of this shop is in Rayna's hands, you must be puzzled, right? The Marquis family's influence really doesn't deserve to be one of the 4 major families if they can't even get such information. Jonah's face flushed red. This fellow's mouth was really too irritating. He wanted nothing more than to stuff that smacking mouth of his. Don't be too nervous. This matter is definitely not something a little kid like you can make the decision. Meg smiled and comforted him. Of course, if you really want to know why this shop belongs to Rayna, you can go to the Grey Temple and ask. You don't have to be hypocritical and try to get information from them. I'll say it here today. This shop belongs to Rayna now. If anyone tries to take it away and hurt her, then don't blame us for being rude. Amy. Super fierce. Amy casually continued Meg's words. She held her magic caster's staff with one hand and clenched her little fist with the other. Her big blue eyes were wide open as she spoke with a serious expression. Fut. So cute. Oh my god. This threat. I'm actually not afraid of it. The onlookers couldn't keep their expressions straight. Jonah frowned. In this situation, he had to do something. Otherwise, it might bring trouble to the family. Little Amy, didn't you say you have classes in the afternoon? Just then, a hoarse voice came from outside. The crowd parted to make a path for an old man with half-white hair and an old magic caster's robe to walk in slowly. This is the Lord of Ice, Julian. What was supposed to be an adorable threat has suddenly become frightening. Everyone lowered their voices as they looked at Urian in awe and veneration. Jonah's expression changed instantly. He immediately looked at Meg and said, I will report this matter to my father. I believe the City Lord's castle will give a fair ruling. Before that, the Marquis family will not appear here again. After saying that, Jonah bowed respectfully to Urian, and quickly left with his subordinates. Are you leaving just like that? Let's fight for a while more, Amy said enthusiastically to Jonah and the rest. Everyone's footsteps quickened. They quickly got into the carriages and almost jogged away. Seriously, there's no one who can fight. Amy shook her head in disappointment. She turned to look at Julian, and immediately put on a cute smile. She kept her magic caster's staff, and smilingly said, Master, why are you here? I'm here to bring you to class, Julian said helplessly. All right. Anyway, the bad guys have been beaten up. I'll skip class then. Amy nodded. Then, she waved at Meg and the rest. Father, I'm going to class. Go on. Be good, Meg agreed with a smile. Millimeter. Amy nodded vigorously, and followed Julian in the direction of the magic potion shop. The onlookers dispersed as well. However, the matter of Bennett being arrested was bound to become a topic of conversation for many people. Julian's appearance was a strong deterrent, and successfully scared Jonah and the rest away. Meg was not worried that the City Lord's castle would side with the Marquis family. Otherwise, Michael would be too much of a failure as the City Lord. He would not agree. After this, no one would come to interrupt the progress of the new hot pot restaurant. They won't come again. Let's go in and take a look. Meg pushed the door open and walked in first. Everyone followed suit and entered in a line. The interior of the hot pot restaurant was rather luxurious. The main colors were gold and red. The tables and chairs were all prepared. They were all red date mahogany tables and were neatly arranged. There were more than 100 tables in the hall on the first floor alone. The scale was more than double that of Amy's. This restaurant is so big. It can accommodate 1,000 people, right? Yarbemia exclaimed. There are private rooms on the second floor. The kitchen is also on the second floor. Raina smiled as she walked in. Let me show you. Is it over just like that? How boring. Irina, who was standing on a nearby roof, shook her head. She glanced at the carriage that was leaving, and a sly smile appeared on her face. Since you want everything, I'll skin you alive. Irina murmured to herself. Chapter 1586. Have you found a construction team? Meg asked Raina casually as he walked around the hot pot restaurant. Millimeter. Phyllis introduced me to a few very capable elven architects. I want to let them complete the final presentation and finishing work. The cost is 50% cheaper than the dwarven architects, and I like their design concept more. Raina nodded with a smile. That's good. Meg nodded slightly. The elves' aesthetic taste was unquestionable. It was most appropriate for them to neutralize the vulgarity brought about by the golden color of this hot pot restaurant. He continued, then you should arrange the construction as soon as possible. I will let the Grey Temple and the City Lord's Castle give you an explanation about the ownership of the restaurant. Okay. I will confirm the final plan with them at noon today, and then we will officially start the construction. Raina nodded. She looked at Meg hesitantly, and said, there is one more thing that I want to discuss with you. Go ahead. That is. Raina grabbed the hem of her clothes, and said hesitantly, I have been experimenting with the hot pot base these days, but when I was making the spicy hot pot base, I found that if there is no spice like Sichuan pepper, the spicy effect cannot be achieved. I can't find any spice that can replace it in the market, so I was thinking, it is indeed difficult to find a substitute for Sichuan pepper. Before you find a suitable substitute, I can provide you with Sichuan pepper, Meg said with a smile. Thank you. Raina's face lit up, but she immediately said seriously, I will pay according to the original price. Sichuan pepper was a precious spice that could not be found in the market at all, so it must be very precious. Raina naturally could not take it from Meg for free. Okay. Meg nodded. With the scale of Raina's hot pot restaurant, he really could not afford to supply it. System, didn't you say that the Sichuan pepper in your restaurant was the best of the best? Then can you sell the remaining 9,999 discarded ones to me at a low price? Meg said in his heart with a smile. Host, according to the system's principles, I don't care what your principles are. I just want you to follow my principles. As a candidate for the god of cookery, my principle is to not waste a single grain or spice. So, name your price, Meg calmly interrupted the system. 10 copper coins for one. All right, 10 copper coins per catty, deal. I'm sure the people of this world will thank you for letting them eat a cheap and delicious spicy hot pot. Meg smiled and won the bid without hesitation. You did the right thing. I also admire your awareness of learning to be flexible. If there's money to be made, everyone can earn it. Thank me. It doesn't exist, Meg said straightforwardly. Okay, changing the food structure and habits of the other world is also one of your tasks. Reusing the spices that were originally discarded and destroyed is also a good idea. The system muttered, reluctantly accepting this result. If you want, I can provide you with 500 catties of Sichuan peppercorns. Let's calculate it at 100 copper coins per catty. Meg looked at Raina with a smile. 100 copper coins. Raina's eyes lit up, and she looked at Meg in disbelief. So cheap. Did you lower the price on purpose for me? You want to make hot pot of food for ordinary people, so controlling the cost of ingredients is the most important thing. Sichuan peppercorns naturally can't be too expensive. It doesn't matter if I suffer a little loss. After all, I have shares in the hot pot restaurant. Meg shook his head with a smile. Host, WQNMLGB. The system's angry roar echoed in Meg's mind. As a system, you must be civilized and not dirty. Meg stayed in the new shop for a while before taking Hannah to the factory in the north of the city. My goodness. What is this steel-like giant thing that can spit air? How can this wheel move by itself? This loom doesn't need to be moved by human hands. It's amazing. Hannah entered the factory like Granny Liu entering the Grandview garden. She touched this and looked at that, and her mouth never closed. Meg gave her a brief introduction to the theory of the steam engine, the concept of the whole textile factory, and how the workers worked together to make the textile more efficient. Did you really invent the steam engine? Hannah walked out of the workshop and looked at Meg with glowing eyes, unable to hide her admiration. Yes. Meg nodded. You're so awesome. You're a genius. Hannah exclaimed. Standing on the shoulders of predecessors can always give others the wrong impression. Meg shrugged. However, Hannah didn't seem to think too much about his words. Instead, she asked curiously, are those huge machines really powered by steam? How can the floating water vapor have such great power? Yes. Don't underestimate the power of steam. They might be able to exert a more stable and long-lasting output than magic, and can be obtained at a lower price. Meg nodded with a smile. He was very satisfied with Hannah's questions that hit the nail on the head. Irina looked at the huge factory thoughtfully. After a moment of silence, her eyes lit up, and she said, so this is the so-called factory. Then, can I also turn the brewery into a huge factory like this? I can divide the brewing process into a few workshops, and let different workers be in charge of juicing, brewing, and mixing. That way, the efficiency of brewing can be greatly improved, and the production of rum can be quantified. That's why I brought you here. I will invest a sum of money to design and manufacture rum machines for you, and build a huge rum brewing factory in Chaos City. You will be in charge of controlling the quality of the rum. If you're not good at factory management and marketing, I can also find someone suitable to help you. Meg looked at Hannah with a smile, and said, what do you think? Hannah looked at Meg with her mouth slightly agape. She only swallowed her saliva after a while, and said, I came to Chaos City just to build my third-generation brewing machine, and then? Hannah thought for a while, and her gaze landed on the factory in front of her. Her eyes gradually lit up. And then, I will open a huge brewery, and let the whole world drink our old Sims rum. Very good. I will invest in this project. Meg nodded. He took out a banknote, signed it, and passed it to Hannah. This is 2 million copper coins. Take it as the initial capital for the brewery. I will add another 8 million copper coins later on. You and I will share this brewery 50-50. 50-50? Hannah held the banknote, and hesitantly said, but I only have 3 million copper coins with me. Won't you be at a disadvantage? Your ability and skills are priceless, Meg said with a smile. Wonderful bookhouse. Chapter 1587. Is the boss of Mammoth standing up for that woman? This fellow really likes to poke his nose into other people's business. He's everywhere. Bowen looked at Jonah with a frown, and said, he was also the one who messed up Cyril's matter previously. He's definitely related to Gloria. He's really a friend of women. Father, I think we have to be more cautious about this matter. It's impossible for Miss Rayner to receive this shop at such a time just because of Meg's relationship. She must have some other connections with the Grey Temple. And Meg could still find out about Bennett's crimes after the news was sealed off. I'm afraid he's also related to the Grey Temple. Bennett has already fallen into an abyss of no return, and the Grey Temple's attitude is not clear enough. I think we should give up on this shop for the time being, and even more businesses that are shady between black and white to prevent the Marquis family from being in danger, Jonah said solemnly. Hey, it's just a chef. Why do you have to be so flustered, my son? Bowen waved his hand nonchalantly, and smilingly said, you don't have to worry about this. I've waited for so many years for Bennett to fall. If I don't take over all the businesses that he's worked so hard for all these years, how can I be worthy of all his hard work? But father, I know your worries. Our Marquis family has been in Chaos City for decades, and our network is far more complicated than you can imagine. How can a chef and a woman from the slums fight with us? However, as you said, this matter involves the Grey Temple, so I will be more cautious. Before the official ruling is out, I will ask them not to find trouble with us. Bowen interrupted Jonah, and waved his hand. Go and get busy. What you have to do now is to revive Ben Tea House. It's worth 100 shops. All right. Jonah nodded, and turned to leave quickly. Bowen sat alone in the room for a while before he got up and walked out. As he walked, he said, Prepare the carriage. I'm going to the Grey Temple. Boss, where are we going now? In the carriage, Hannah looked at Meg and asked. She was still excited about visiting the factory. Just like MIA and the others, Hannah had changed the way she addressed Meg as boss. After all, she was now officially employed by Meg as Mammy's chief brewer. Let's go back to the restaurant. The restaurant will officially open for business tonight. There are a lot of preparations that need to be done in advance. Meg looked at Hannah and continued, in order to appease the customer's resentment, I intend to release the rum you brewed at the same time as the husband and wife lung slice. But I only have old base wine left in my wine gourd, and the machines have been sold as scrap metal. There's no way to brew it, Hannah said helplessly. It's okay. I took some of your cellar wine from Connie. It's enough for the restaurant to use for a while. Also, this can be treated as a trial run for the rum. We can see the market's reaction to the rum, and provide some data for us to build the factory. Meg shook his head with a smile. Because Connie had successfully taken over the Fork tribe, he returned most of the treasures that the system had taken away. He used the rest to pay the system's custodian fee, and kept about 300 million to 500 million yuan for this trip. And in the space that the system had vacated, Meg took a few hundred barrels of Hannah's rum from Connie. He could sell them directly on the shelves when he brought them back. I see. Hannah understood, but she quickly said seriously, Boss, don't worry. I will build the third-generation brewing machine very soon, and put it into production so that there will be an endless supply of rum. There's no need to rush the manufacturing. Your third-generation brewing machine's design is indeed not bad, but there are still many details that can be polished. How to maximize the efficiency of energy and raw materials, how to make the machine operate more efficiently, and how to integrate the steam engine into the brewing process to make the whole brewing process more advanced and efficient. These are all things that can be considered. Meg looked at Hannah with a smile, and said, We will strive to make this machine more perfect. Steam engine plus brewing machine. Hannah thought seriously for a while. Her eyes lit up, and she excitedly said, Yes. If we can integrate them, the brewing efficiency will definitely be very high. Just the extraction of sugarcane juice alone can save a lot of time. When we go back, I will give you the schematics and design of the steam engine. At the same time, I will teach you how to draw more standardized drawings so that it won't be difficult for you to connect with the blacksmith during the manufacturing stage. Meg continued. Hannah's drawings were not bad, but they were too wild. Others might not be able to understand her drawings. The more complicated the machine, the higher the requirement for precision. This aspect had to be standardized. Millimeter. Okay. Hannah nodded. She had no objections to Meg's arrangement at all. After seeing the steam engine textile machine today, she was completely in awe of Meg. This machine was much more complicated than the brewing machine. Meg was indeed a master of mechanics. It was only 3 in the afternoon, but there were already customers loitering in front of the restaurant. Clearly, they wanted to know if the restaurant would be open for business tonight. Meg entered the restaurant, and wrote a small blackboard to hang at the door. Business will be resumed tonight. New products, husband and wife lung slice and rum. There's wine, there's food, and I have a story. Miss, let me treat you to dinner tonight, Harrison said to a beautiful succubus lady affectionately. I can consider it when you lose half of your weight. That succubus lady chuckled. She swung her wavy brown hair, and walked toward the back of the line. In that case, you can only lose me. Harrison sighed and touched his round tummy. He looked at the announcement on the small blackboard and chuckled again. Although this big sister is good, she can't be compared to Mr. Mac. New products are so good. He. The news of Mr. Mac's return and the reopening of Mammoth became the happiest news for all the foodies in Chaos City today. Of course, apart from the much-anticipated husband and wife lung slice, the rum had also attracted the attention of many alcohol lovers by launching 2 new products at once. Rum? Isn't that the specialty of the Fork tribe in the Twilight Forest? Mr. Mac went to the Fork tribe and even brought back a specialty product for everyone to try. I also heard that the Fork tribe's rum is rather famous in the Twilight Forest, and the rum brewed by the master brewer, Old Sim, is the best. An old friend brought me a small flask of it back then. That taste. TSK. It's amazing. Storyteller Carl smacked his lips with a smile and said, I wonder if the rum Mr. Mac brought back is as good as the flask I had back then. It has to be the best for Mr. Mac to launch it as a new product, someone replied. That might not be the case. You guys don't know how proud that Master Old Sim is. I wanted to buy a bottle of rum that he brewed himself back then, and asked many people for help, but I couldn't get it. It's impossible for Mr. Mac to buy Master Old Sim's rum to sell, Old Carl said with certainty as he waved his hand. Chapter 1588. Old Carl had been a storyteller in the Aiden Square for over a decade, but he didn't make a living from this. He worked in the City Lord's castle for his whole life when he was young, and retired at 60. Storytelling was just a hobby that he enjoyed in his spare time. However, even though it was a hobby, he had made it a specialty that others couldn't learn. With his interesting and rich stories, he kept up with the hot news, and became the most beloved storyteller in the Aiden Square, and even in the whole of Chaos City. Of course, after working in the City Lord's castle for so many years, he could still hear things that ordinary people couldn't even hear after he retired. So, when he said that, it became a story. Therefore, Old Carl was recognized as a knowledgeable person. Hearing him praising rum in such a manner, many wine lovers also revealed expressions of interest. Old Mr. Carl is right. When I went to the Fork tribe to do business last year, it was simply too difficult to buy Master Old Sim's rum. All of it was taken by the royal family and nobles, so there was very little circulating in the market, a goblin said in a low voice. He then lowered his voice, and continued, it's even harder now. There's a coup in the Fork tribe, and the merchants don't dare to go there anymore. The price of ordinary rum in the market has skyrocketed, and it's frighteningly high. Fake rum is everywhere. It's not easy to drink real rum now. Even if it's not brewed by Master Old Sim, as long as Mr. Mac could bring back rum that originated from the Fork tribe, it would be much better than those rum that we don't know where it came from in the market, Old Carl lamented. Apart from storytelling, drinking was his second favorite hobby. When he was drinking with his old friend last night, he heard that something big had happened in the Fork tribe these few days. The princess who was wandering outside had returned to the tribe, killed the Kingslayer Gary, exposed her elder brother's evil deeds, ascended to the throne, and became the first female chief of the Fork tribe. He hadn't come across such a good story in a long time. It was only slightly better than Irina leading the night elves out of the Wind Forest and migrating thousands of miles to Chaos City. He had the story, but how to tell it brilliantly was the most challenging thing for a storyteller. Such a complicated and exciting story perfectly continued the story of the Kingslayer and the Brothers Layer that he told last month. This godlike twist and development was really unexpected. He was prepared to spend half a month or even a month to polish the story and script. Of course, if he had some good alcohol at this time, he might be able to get some inspiration. That was why he had specially come to Mammoth to drink today. Since they had launched rum, of course he had to give it a try. It wasn't just the drinkers. Mammoth was closed for 4 days, which made many of the regular customers who treated Mammoth as their own cafeteria cry, "Phew, uncle, look at you. If you came a little later, we wouldn't be able to eat hot pot tonight." Vanessa pulled Abraham to the back of the line and stood on her tiptoes to count the number of people. She heaved a sigh of relief after making sure that they could eat. These guys are really early. Abraham panted heavily. The carriage had stopped 500 meters away, and he had to jog for such a long distance. It was really killing him. Life is so short. Missing a meal means one less meal. Of course, we have to be early, Vanessa said matter-of-factly. She looked in the direction of the restaurant, and enviously said, I'm still envious of the ladies in the restaurant. They don't have to line up every day, and they don't miss out on any of the 3 meals a day. They are so blessed. They are so busy with work. They have so many customers to entertain, but all you see is food, Abraham said with a smile. That's true. Vanessa stuck out her little tongue embarrassedly. If it were her, she definitely wouldn't be able to do it. She was too clumsy. Bro, we just ate Mr. Mac's delicacies at the Fork Tribe 2 days ago, and we can eat them again in Chaos City. What a seamless connection, Harris said in his tribal language with a chuckle as he stood beside Hagar. Hagar only chuckled, and didn't say anything. He looked in the direction of the restaurant with anticipation. Chapman stood behind Harris, and softly asked, Master, Grandmaster is back. Do you still want to learn how to cook from him? Of course. I haven't even mastered the husband and wife lung slice yet. Wouldn't I be ruining my master's reputation if I went out? Harris said matter-of-factly. But I've already learned it, Chapman said hesitantly. Harris. Master, that's not what I meant. I'm just saying that I can teach you a little if you need. Chapman quickly waved his hands. Great, you rascal. You even want to be my master now, Harris said with a huff. No. Chapman was so anxious that sweat was breaking out on his forehead. All right, I'm just teasing you, Harris said with a smile. Let's not talk about other things. I've learned a lot from tasting different delicacies here every day. To me, it's already better than traveling thousands of miles. I've been walking for so long, and it's time for me to take a break. I can't find a restaurant like this anywhere else that can continuously surprise me. Chapman looked at Harris' side profile, and nodded thoughtfully. It was only halfway through winter in Chaos City. Apart from some species that weren't afraid of the cold, most of the customers were wrapped in thick cotton-padded jackets. In this kind of weather, it was naturally the best to meet up for hot pot. The customers who were eating the hot pot were lining up separately, and their popularity was not inferior to the customers who were having a normal dinner. Although the hot pot is delicious, it's a little expensive. After this meal, I can only say goodbye to the hot pot with tears in my eyes, a young man lamented. Yes. If it could be cheaper, I would have brought my whole family here too. Now, I even have to control myself when choosing the dishes, a middle-aged man lamented. There are a few cheap hot pot restaurants up ahead. Their prices are not even a third of Mammoth's, but the taste. I regret meeting Mammy for the rest of my life, a young white-collar lady said with a smile. Sigh. I've been to those hot pot restaurants for the past 2 days. I only learned some superficial skills from those hot pot restaurants. They can't even cook the bone broth well. If boiled vegetables can be called hot pot, then my mom would have been a chef 20 years ago, Harrison said with pursed lips with disdain written all over his face. Everyone couldn't help but laugh when they heard that. If they weren't particular about the taste, they wouldn't have come an hour earlier to wait in the cold wind. Welcome, Mammoth. Just then, the restaurant's door opened, and Meg walked out first. He stood at the door with a smile, and said, "The restaurant is open now. Please come in." The customers greeted Meg with a smile, and filed in. "Mr. Mac, did you bring this rum back from the Fork Tribe?" a customer asked curiously when he entered. "Of course. Old Sim's rum. You deserve it," Meg said with a smile. Wonderful bookhouse. Chapter 1589. Old Sim Brand. Old Carl, who was about to enter, stopped in his tracks, and looked at Meg in disbelief. "Mr. Mac, are you saying that the rum sold in your shop is brewed by Master Old Sim himself?" "It's the real deal." Meg nodded with a smile. Although the real Old Sim had passed away, Hannah's brewing skills were not inferior to her grandfather's, so the people of the Fork Tribe still called the rum brewed by Hannah as Old Sim. It was considered a rather well-known local brand. How is that possible?" Old Carl stared at Meg in disbelief. "You will know after you try it," Meg said with a smile. All right. I do want to see if this Old Sim brand rum is authentic. Old Sim nodded and walked into the restaurant quickly. He chose a seat nearby and flipped open the menu on the table eagerly. There was an additional item in the alcohol column. Old Sim brand rum, 1,000 copper coins per glass. What a shocking price. The customer who shared a table with Old Carl said in shock after glancing at the price. If this is really Old Sim brand rum, then this price is indeed a little shocking. Old Carl looked at the menu and raised his voice. Shockingly cheap. Yes. Let's not talk about Old Sim's brand. An authentic bottle of ordinary rum imported from the Fork tribe can be sold for 500 to 600 copper coins in Chaos City. The ones from the slightly more famous distilleries can easily be sold for thousands of copper coins. Some time ago, a poor fellow was cheated and bought a bottle of Old Sim brand rum that cost 5,000 copper coins. In the end, it was a small workshop in Chaos City that made the Old Sim brand rum for 1,000 copper coins per glass. This price is indeed shockingly cheap. A man who had a wine flask with him sat down opposite Old Carl with a smile. You know your stuff. Old Carl smiled at that man. When he saw Yabemia walking over, he directly said, I'll have a serving of husband and wife lung slice and a glass of rum. All right. Yabemia nodded. I'll have a small spicy grilled fish, a glass of rum and a glass of beer, the man sitting opposite Old Carl said with a smile. Okay. Please wait a moment. Yabemia walked to the next table after ordering for all the customers at that table. Carl could be considered a regular customer of Immerse. As the owner of a cloth shop, he didn't have any bad habits except for a sip of alcohol. There weren't many good winemakers in Chaos City, and only a few wineries' fruit wines were drinkable. He would usually ask someone to bring wine from other places. Immerse beer was the most delightful beer that he had tasted in Chaos City. Paired with the spicy grilled fish, it was a delightful combination. However, even though beer was refreshing, for someone like him who drank alcohol all year round, he always felt that it was a little lacking. As such, he would always bring a small jug of beer with him when he came to eat. The jug of beer was filled with aged wine that he had asked someone to bring back from Rodu. Only after drinking a few mouthfuls of beer would he feel a little tipsy. As for rum, it was also one of his favorites. Old Sim's wine was something that could only be chanced upon. It was basically priceless in Chaos City. Even someone like him, who had been drinking for 20 to 30 years, had to wait in the aisles. The feeling of drinking fake wine was not a good feeling. Recently, he heard that there was a coup in the Fork tribe, and the price of rum had skyrocketed. Even normal rum wasn't easy to find anymore. As he was worried that he would buy fake alcohol from black-hearted merchants, he hadn't drunk rum for 2 months. Today, when he saw Immerse launching rum under Old Sim's brand, he was pleasantly surprised, but also a little suspicious. A bottle of rum was hard to come by on the market. Why was it sold by the glass in Mr. Mac's shop like beer? It was only 1,000 copper coins. Even if it was fake, Carl wouldn't feel the pinch. Hence, although he was suspicious, he still ordered a glass. Old Carl was still sitting opposite him. If it was fake alcohol, then there would be another story of black-hearted merchants who sold fake alcohol to those who knew them. Boss, will people really order my rum? Will the people in Chaos City not be used to this kind of alcohol? In the kitchen, Hannah looked at the customers outside worriedly. Although she was very confident in her brewing skills, she was afraid that the rum wouldn't be acclimatized to a new place. Don't worry. Although rum is a niche alcohol in Chaos City, there is still a very good place for it to grow, Meg answered as he cooked the fried rice. He had spent some time to check on the alcohol situation in Chaos City before. The local distilleries were of a low standard, and couldn't satisfy the needs of some drinkers who wanted high-quality alcohol. Hence, there were specialized merchants who brought alcohol back from all over to sell, and the market was quite big. Although rum was a niche alcohol, that was because it wasn't easy to obtain and transport it. The roads in the Twilight Forest weren't easy to walk on, and alcohol wasn't easy to transport. Hence, there wasn't a lot of rum shipped to Chaos City. Meg's purpose of launching rum at Amy's was to cultivate a batch of high-quality loyal customers for his distillery in the future. Then, he wouldn't have to worry about sales. We have ordered a total of 18 glasses of rum. One for customers 1 and 3 at table 3, one for customer 2 at table 4, and one for table 6. Yabemia walked into the kitchen and began to report the order. Barbara stood at the entrance of the kitchen with her eyes closed. Glasses of amber rum floated out of the round glasses and landed accurately in front of the customers that Yabemia had reported. Wow, so cool. A spatial magic caster is in charge of serving the dishes. This restaurant is so cool. A little girl exclaimed as she clapped her hands. The customers smiled at the little girl's naive look. Of course, this was indeed very cool. However, many people were attracted by the fragrant wine fragrance that drifted through the air. It was a fragrance that made people happy. Just by smelling it, they felt like they were intoxicated. However, the glasses weren't big, and a small glass of rum cost 1,000 copper coins. Some customers who didn't know how to drink felt that the price was a little too high, and couldn't help but feel pity for those who ordered rum. Thud, with a soft thud, 2 glasses landed in front of old Carl and Karu. Both of their gazes were attracted by the transparent glasses filled with amber liquid in front of them at the same time. This glass was smaller than a beer glass, and didn't have a handle. It was a glass that could be held with one's hand. A strong alcohol aroma wafted towards them impatiently. The mellow aroma seemed to have a hint of white oak's aroma, and made both of their eyes light up at the same time. It's this aroma. It's this aroma. The aroma of the rum brewed by Master Old Sim. This unique aroma can't be replicated. It's definitely it. Old Carl exclaimed in surprise. He couldn't hide his excitement. On the other hand, Karu lowered his head and took a deep whiff of the aroma. He revealed an intoxicated expression, and also couldn't hide his excitement. Not only is this brewed by Master Old Sim, this is rum that has been in the cellar for more than 15 years. Rum of this quality, coupled with Master Old Sim's golden brand, can be sold for at least 5,000 copper coins for a cup. Chapter 1590. A glass of rum was placed on the table, and it ignited the passion of the customers who ordered rum instantly. Good alcohol couldn't fool anyone. Of course, those who didn't know the good stuff were an exception. Even if this first batch of customers who ordered rum weren't rum aficionados, they had at least drunk it a few times. They could tell that it was the real deal just by looking at the quality and smelling the aroma. Old Carl picked up the glass carefully, and looked at it carefully in the direction of the floor-to-ceiling window. The amber-colored rum was clear and translucent without any impurities. Although this glass wasn't as grand as a beer glass, it was enough for an ordinary person to drink a glass of rum of such high quality. Old Carl placed the glass beside his mouth and took a sip. The delicate and sweet taste was intoxicating. The aroma was heavy and there was a hint of wood in it. Only the aged wine that was stored in an oak barrel would have such a wonderful taste. He had been thinking about that small bottle of rum for 18 years. That was only a bottle of 3-year-old rum, and it was also made by Master Old Sim. He originally thought that it would be very difficult for him to drink rum made by Master Old Sim again in his life. He didn't expect that he would be able to drink such authentic rum that had been kept in the cellar for a mere 1,000 copper coins at Mammy Restaurant. After a long while, Old Carl opened his eyes slowly, and lamented, "I didn't expect that I would really be able to drink rum made by Master Old Sim again. This Mr. Mac is something. It's not just something. Mr. Mac is really something." Karu's glass was also half empty. His cheeks were flushed, and he couldn't hide his agitation. Anyone in the drinking circle who had a bottle of unopened rum made by Master Old Sim that had been in the cellar for more than 15 years would be very impressive. After all, this was a high-quality rum that was specially provided for the Fork tribe's nobles and chiefs. However, no one would expect that he would be able to drink rum of such quality in a restaurant in Chaos City. Furthermore, he only spent 1,000 copper coins. If this were to spread out, the rum lovers in Chaos City would probably be in an uproar. He didn't know what methods Boss Mag used to be able to get such high-quality rum and sell it at such a low price. He couldn't be any more conscientious. It even made him a little worried if he would make a loss. 1,000 copper coins for a cup of wine was not cheap, but the people who ordered the wine said it was worth it. The response seems to be pretty good. Meg heard the praises and excited voices in the kitchen and wasn't too surprised. Hannah's wine was indeed good. This batch of wine should have been brewed by her grandfather. There was no need to doubt or worry about the quality. The customers who ordered the rum gave extremely high comments and feedback, which made some customers who didn't know much about rum, but who also liked rum, unable to resist the temptation and also tried to order rum. Karu took small sips. Before the grilled fish was served, he had already drunk half of the rum in his hand. Seeing Yabemia pass by, he hurriedly raised his hand and said, "Miss, can you help me fill this wine pot with rum? You just have to charge as much as you want." Old Carl's eyes lit up when he heard that. He began to search in his pocket to see if there was anything he could use to hold the rum. It would be even better to bring such good wine back and take a sip from time to time. Many customers were tempted when they heard that. Some of the customers who had wine pots with them already smiled. They would bring some back and call a few of their old drinking buddies to let them see the world. "I'm sorry, customer. The wine in the restaurant is not allowed to be taken out, and we don't provide takeaway service," Yabemia rejected with a smile. "Then can I just have 1 cup? I can even pay more. How about 1,500 copper coins for a cup?" Karu said with a sincere face. He had a bad habit. No matter where he went, he liked to take a sip or two of wine when he was free. He didn't drink much, but he couldn't drink less. Today, he came across such a good wine. If he could fill the wine pot and take a small sip from time to time, wouldn't it be a great pleasure? "I'm sorry. This is the restaurant's rule." Yabemia rejected without hesitation. "All right, I'm being greedy." Karu sighed. He could understand the reason behind this. Such a good wine was being sold at such a low price. According to the market price, it was selling the wine at a loss. If someone wanted to pack it up and take it away, they would be able to resell it at several times the profit. "Miss Mia, I have a friend who has been bedridden for 3 years. He's going to die soon, so he wants to drink a cup of Master Old Sim's rum before he dies." "Look," an orc at the side said affectionately. "Here's my customer. You can take a look at the rules behind the menu," Mia replied with a smile. "Hee hee. I'm just kidding." That orc chuckled instantly. He scratched his head embarrassedly and said, "My father always says that our tribe is just beside the Fork tribe. We've moved to Chaos City for decades, and the thing that we can't forget is Master Old Sim's rum. I don't know much about wine, and have been cheated by the wine peddlers many times over the years. It's fine if I lose money, but being laughed at by my old man is the worst. He can't walk very well now, so I want to bring a cup back for him to try. So many people here said that it's real, so I think it must be true this time. However, we know Mammoth's rules, too. I'd better wait for my old man to get better before I bring him here to drink it." Yabemia looked at that orc. His lips moved slightly, but he still nodded slightly, and said, "All right." He then walked to the next customer. "I didn't expect so many people in the faraway Chaos City know that my grandpa likes the rum he brews," Hannah said softly as she stood at the entrance of the kitchen and looked at the excited people, as well as the people who were lost in their thoughts and memories. A teardrop slid down from the corner of her eye and landed on the ground. However, she quickly wiped the tear stain away. "Boss, I've decided. Apart from building the brewing machine, I still want to brew properly. I don't want Old Sim and the other 2 to fail in my hands." Hannah turned back to look at Meg, and said with certainty. Then, she revealed a radiant smile. "That's pretty good. We can't throw away our traditional skills." Meg nodded. "So the taste of rum is so wonderful. This aroma and texture completely crushes those breweries in Chaos City. Master Old Sim really lives up to his name." Harrison's glass was already half full. His round body swayed a little as he squinted, and said, "But, isn't this rum a little too strong? Why do I feel that the glass in my hand has become too?" "Brother, we've just started. Why you can't collapse so quickly?" Gyurge said seriously as he held onto the pillar beside him. Chapter 1591. Rum was a liquor with a high alcohol content. Meg had drunk it before when he was at the Fork tribe. The 15-year-old rum had an alcohol content of about 50 to 60%. It was not something that beer with an alcohol content of 8 to 9% could compare to. And for people who were used to drinking fruit wine and beer, the most direct reaction when they suddenly drank alcohol with such a high alcohol content was that they would get drunk easily. Harrison and George had already realized that the power of this liquor was a little unusual, so they put the liquor aside and waited for the dishes to be served obediently. It was nothing to get drunk from good liquor, but it would be a pity to get drunk before they even tried the new dish, husband and wife lung slice. They had to try the new dish. That was the consensus of the two of them. Your husband and wife lung slice. Just then, Yarbemia walked over and placed a plate of husband and wife lung slice between them. Wow, such a bright color, such a fragrant, spicy, and alluring aroma. It really makes me want to try it. Harrison stared at the husband and wife lung slice with his eyes wide open. The beef and beef offal slices were stacked on top of each other, forming the shape of a volcano in the middle of the plate. There was even a spoonful of red chili oil on top of this volcano, making it look like an active volcano that was ready to erupt. Then, there was a sprinkle of cooked sesame seeds and crushed peanuts, and some tender green coriander. The bright and alluring color coupled with the spicy aroma made one salivate uncontrollably. I've waited for so many days for this dish, and I can finally eat it. Mr. Mac really whetted my appetite. George swallowed his saliva, and picked up a piece of beef with his chopsticks first. The thin beef was coated with a layer of translucent chili oil, and there were a few cooked sesame seeds and crushed peanuts on the surface. The aroma of the braised meat and chili oil wafted over slowly. It had already started to stir the taste buds before it entered the mouth. With a bite, the rich aroma of the chili oil and the spiciness bloomed on the tip of the tongue at the same time, and what followed was the rich braised meat aroma of the beef. The soft and smooth beef melted with a light bite. His taste buds started to tremble and go crazy uncontrollably as he welcomed the attack of this spicy aroma. Wow! George's fat couldn't help but tremble. That wonderful feeling felt as if lightning had struck his body, and his brain had been split open. He was going to heaven. Rip! His clothes were already trembling uncontrollably, and his fats were mercilessly ripped apart. I'm sorry, I really can't control myself. George adjusted his clothes shyly with an awkward smile. Is it that explosive? Harrison raised his comical short eyebrows, and also picked up a piece of tripe impatiently. He was an avid fan of hot pot tripe. If not for the fact that he wanted to try the new product, and had endured for these few days, he would definitely go and make a hot pot to reward himself. The tripe was cut into long strips, and after being braised, it was light yellow in color. There was a natural grid on the surface, and it was wrapped in a layer of bright red oil. It looked very delicate and attractive. In terms of appearance, the tripe and tripe were two completely different things. The tripe that was as thin as paper had the characteristics of being crispy, tender, and refreshing. However, was this rather complicated and thick tripe really as delicious as the judges said? Harrison couldn't help but have some doubts, but he still put the tripe into his mouth without hesitation. As soon as the tripe entered his mouth, his teeth began to clash with the tripe. The thick tripe was indeed not as crispy as the tripe. This tripe was a little chewy, but it wasn't hard to chew. With a little bit of force, it opened up, and the chewy texture gave one a different kind of interest. The fragrant red oil, cooked sesame seeds, and crushed peanuts began to bloom beautifully on the tip of the tongue, but they were more like a group of bands wearing bright red clothes, solemnly pushing out the tripe amidst the din of gongs and drums. The fragrance of the braising was so rich that it seemed to have seeped into every inch of the tripe, then fermented, brewed, and exploded again. The red oil, the braising, and the tripe's own fragrance fought on the tip of the tongue, and his taste buds had no time to respond at all. He could only sigh inwardly and then surrender. Spicy and refreshing. It's not inferior to the tripe, indeed lives up to its reputation. This tripe is really amazing. It's so delicious that it's irresistible. Harrison only felt that he had sobered up by about 50%. Apart from the spicy and refreshing taste, he couldn't help but pick up the wine glass beside him and take a big gulp. Good wine paired with good food made the feeling of pleasure go up another level. This is really the best dish to go with wine, Harrison praised. Isn't that so? With a different cooking method, Mr. Mac has opened up a new world for beef for me. George nodded in agreement. Small beads of sweat had already appeared on his forehead due to the spicy taste and the alcohol. It was more than refreshing to describe. After all, it was a highly anticipated new product, and there were many customers who ordered the husband and wife lung slice tonight. Vivian and Luna sat in the corner with a spicy grilled fish in front of them and a serving of the husband and wife lung slice that had just been served. Vivian, do you think this dish is really made with the lungs of a married couple? Luna looked at the big plate of red husband and wife lung slice in front of her. This scary name made her think of some scary things. Vivian leaned forward slightly and waved at Luna as she whispered, "Come here. Let me tell you a little secret." "What is it?" Luna went up to her curiously. "My father said that there have been a lot of loving couples going missing in Chaos City recently. Moreover, every time their bodies are found, their lungs." Vivian had a creepy smile on her face. "Ah!" Luna leaned back in shock and let out a soft cry. She looked at the husband and wife lung slice in front of her in horror, which attracted the puzzled gazes of the customers sitting at the other tables. "Ha ha ha!" Vivian laughed so hard that tears welled up in the corners of her eyes. She only stopped laughing after a long while, and said, "Their lungs are all intact." "Why, you rascal? You only know how to lie to me and scare me." Luna looked at Vivian angrily and helplessly. Then, she nodded apologetically to the people around her. "I didn't expect our teacher Luna to believe such a story." Vivian shrugged. She picked up a piece of beef scalp with her chopsticks eagerly, and said, "These are all made with beef and beef offal. Although it's called husband and wife lung slice, there isn't even beef lung in it. Mr. Mac's clickbait is getting worse and worse." "So it's beef?" Luna heaved a sigh of relief when she heard that. "Yes. Look at this. It's the beef scalp." Vivian placed the beef scalp against the light, and the light shone through the gelatinous beef scalp. The translucent beef scalp was covered with a layer of red oil, and it looked very tempting. She couldn't help but exclaim, "Mr. Mac is indeed worthy of his reputation. Even a piece of beef scalp can be made into a piece of art. I must find a man as outstanding as him in the future. If I can't find one, I will die alone." Chapter 1592. That won't be easy. Luna turned toward the kitchen with a smile. From where she was standing, she could see Meg's busy back through the kitchen's glass window. He was holding up a busy restaurant all by himself, yet he was still able to maintain a warm and gentle demeanor toward everyone. Furthermore, he was also very accomplished in mathematics. It would be very difficult to find another man like him in Chaos City. "What about you, Luna? I heard that your father is already urging you to go back to Rodu to get married. He's already looking for a lot of suitors for you." Vivian looked at Luna with a smile, and said, "Those guys have heard that our Luna is unparalleled in beauty, so they must be trying to marry you." "Of course not." Luna blushed, and shook her head as she said, "Grandpa rejected them on my behalf. I don't want to get married right now. The education reform is a long-term thing, and I don't want to be distracted by marriage. I can't guarantee that the person I'm going to marry will be able to support me." Vivian's smile faded, and she looked at Luna with pity in her eyes as she said, "You're right. Our teacher Luna is a very busy person. This semester is about to end, and many children will be able to start school in the next semester. You'll definitely be very busy during the 1-month break, so you have to take care of yourself." Luna had been working even harder ever since she set up the foundation. She had to buy things for the children, supervise the construction of the new teaching area, and take up almost all of her time. It was rare for her to have time to go out with Vivian, so she had lost even more weight. "It's all right. The school building is almost finished, and the things that we've bought and donated are all in place. We should be able to finish everything before the start of the next semester," Luna said with a smile. "If you ask me, a busy person like you should find a man who can take care of you and feed you well," Vivian said with a sigh. Vivian sighed with emotion. All of a sudden, she was taken aback as she turned her gaze toward the kitchen. "What are you looking at?" Luna waved a hand in front of her eyes. "The best candidate for your husband," Vivian said with a serious expression. Luna followed her gaze and happened to see Meg in the kitchen, who had turned around to grill beef kebabs. She blushed again and rebuked, "What are you talking about? I'm not talking nonsense. I'm serious." Vivian grabbed Luna's hand and leaned forward. She lowered her voice and said, "Listen to my analysis. Don't you want to find a man who can support your career? Didn't Mr. Mack support you first when you set up the charity foundation? And during this period of time, he has been constantly helping you and the foundation. You definitely don't want to have a child right now. That cute and obedient little Amy is the perfect solution to the problem of having a child. Don't you like her very much? Besides, Mr. Mack is a top-notch stay-at-home dad. Even if you have a child in the future, you don't have to worry at all. Just leave the child in his hands and you can do whatever you want. Of course, the most important thing is that you can eat the food he cooks every day. It's the dream of many women in Chaos City to be able to eat the food personally prepared by Mr. Mack every morning when they wake up. Then, I don't have to worry about your health. Given his personality of spoiling children, he must be a wife-spoiling maniac too. What I should worry about is whether you'll gain weight. See, after my analysis, Mr. Mack is super suitable for you, right? According to your analysis, all the ladies in Chaos City are lining up to marry Mr. Meg." Luna chuckled, but her face was still red. Although she tried hard to chase Vivian's words out of her mind, they kept circling in her mind like a curse. For so many years, other than her grandfather, no other man had supported her as much as he did. Even her father and those men who were pursuing her couldn't understand what she was doing for the children. They tried to persuade her not to continue filling this bottomless pit. But she was only doing what she could, and those children could only rely on her. She had to admit that Mr. Meg was indeed a very special person. But, was she really good enough for him? She might not even be able to take care of her own life, so how could she take on the responsibilities of a family and a mother? Vivian nodded matter-of-factly, and said, "Of course. Mr. Mack is young and promising, and has strong genes. He's good in the kitchen, elegant in his speech, gentle in his actions, and most importantly, he's quite handsome. He's a typical super high-quality, rich young man. If he puts up a marriage notice on the door, the line of people who want to go on a blind date will probably stretch all the way to the city gate." "Is that so?" Luna covered her mouth. She was shocked and a little disappointed. If that was the case, then it wouldn't even be her turn. Don't be discouraged. You have little Amy as your trump card. With your relationship with little Amy, and Mr. Mack's love for little Amy, your chances of getting married are very high. Vivian held Luna's hand and encouraged her. But for such a high-quality golden bachelor, you have to be more proactive. Otherwise, others might beat you to it. But you can't be too proactive. It doesn't match your temperament and profession. You have to establish the image of a noble female teacher and arouse the other party's desire to conquer. Then, you have to play hard to get. Wait, where did you learn all this from? Luna looked at Vivian suspiciously. She knew very well what her best friend had experienced in the past 18 years. She was definitely a single dog from her mother's womb, so why was she talking about these things now? Hehe, it's just a book. There's everything in the book. Vivian smiled proudly. Okay, let's not talk about this anymore. Luna rolled her eyes and glanced at the grilled fish. Your grilled fish is going to burn if you don't eat it. Oh, I almost forgot about the important matter. Vivian was shocked. She quickly picked up her chopsticks and scratched the bottom of the grilled fish a few times to prevent the skin from being eaten by the abominable grilled fish. Then, she began to eat the grilled fish seriously. Luna ate a few mouthfuls of grilled fish and turned her head to look in the direction of the kitchen. Seeing the busy figure, the corners of her mouth curled up slightly. She quickly withdrew her gaze and chatted with Vivian. As Mammy's first cold dish, the husband and wife lung slice received unanimous praise from the customers. On the other hand, the rum made many guests drunk. Among them, there was no lack of 2 or 3 people who got drunk together, and there were also some who got drunk alone. Those who had a coachman with them were fine, but for those who didn't, Meg had to pry an address out of their vague mouths and call a carriage to send them away. Of course, many of them were sent to places like Wafting Fragrance Court. Of the 10 tables of female guests, 5 of them are discussing how to win your heart, and the other 5 are lamenting that they married too early. Your popularity among women is really amazing. Irina, who was wearing thin pajamas and holding a red wine glass, walked down the stairs gracefully. She looked at Meg, who had just closed the door, and said with a faint smile, Chapter 1593. The blood-like red wine swirled in the wine glass. Meg looked at Irina, who was walking down the stairs step by step. The thin white gauze pajamas gave off a hazy feeling. Although he couldn't see anything, it gave him the illusion that he could see everything. Her long silver hair was casually draped behind her back, and her jade-like feet were bare just like that. Every step she took, a piece of green leaf would appear under her feet, perfectly supporting her. That beautiful face, that beautiful smile on her lips, such a peerless beauty walking toward him, any man would probably go crazy for her. Meg was a man, but he couldn't really go crazy at this moment. Instead, he was a little flustered because of Irina's words. Customers will always have some unrealistic thoughts when they eat delicious food. Meg coughed dryly, and said seriously, am I a man that they can get? Phut, Irina couldn't help but laugh. Her usually cold face was like a blooming flower, and Meg was a little dazed. What's wrong? Irina looked at him. Nothing, I just think that you look a little good when you smile. A little? No. It's very good looking. How good looking? Irina stepped forward, and was almost right in front of Meg. The faint fragrance that greeted him was like the water of life, making him feel pleasant and comfortable. Meg looked at the person in front of him, and said with a smile, the sun, the moon, and the stars are not enough to describe you. In my eyes, you are the most beautiful. Irina paused and looked into Meg's eyes. Her bright eyes were like stars, sincere and passionate. Although her expression was still calm, her heart started to beat faster uncontrollably. Meg also looked at Irina, who was so close to him. Her plump red lips were extremely alluring, and a strange impulse gradually rose in his heart. The alluring aroma of the red wine was gradually intoxicating, and the two of them slowly leaned forward. This kiss was passionate and long. Rodu, the royal palace. Let's go and bring Vanessa back. There are too many uncertainties over there. It's no longer safe, Andre said to Sean, who was half kneeling on the ground. Yes. Sean got up, turned around, and then stopped. He turned back and said hesitantly, Father, if I meet Alex on this trip, what should I do? Do you have the confidence to kill him? Andre asked. No. Sean shook his head. He does. I understand. Sean nodded and turned to leave quickly. The Wind Forest, the Endless Sea Realm, the Twilight Forest. Alex, you really are everywhere. Andre paced slowly in the palace with an inexplicable smile on his face. It seems like you've been living well for the past 3 years. It's just that you've become more nosy. Not far away, the blue flames at the top of the magnificent Mage Tower were still burning fiercely. The Triennial Magic Caster Conference is about to begin. As usual, Crassus will come to open the conference. Should we invite him this year? Of course. He doesn't belong to the Mage Tower anymore. What's the point of inviting him? The Magic Caster Conference was proposed and established by Master Crassus. Over the years, many outstanding talents have been selected for the Magic Caster world. It has opened up a path for the poor magic casters, and greatly promoted the development of the Magic Caster world in the Roth Empire. We can all choose not to participate in the Magic Caster Conference, but we can't do without Master Crassus. Nonsense. I think you want to betray the Mage Tower too. That's why you keep speaking up for Crassus. Freedom of movement in the Mage Tower is one of the 10 principles. I've never seen anyone say that leaving the Mage Tower is a betrayal. If there's justice in your heart, you'll naturally know what Master Crassus has done for the Mage Tower. I'm not speaking up for him, but for justice. A round-table conference was going on in the Mage Tower's conference hall. However, the conference had already gone on for several hours, and the debate was still ongoing. "That's enough," Richard, who was sitting in the main seat, said in a low voice. The voices in the conference hall gradually died down, and everyone turned to look at Richard. "I'll send an invitation to Crassus. As for whether he wants to come, that's up to him." Richard stood up and walked toward the door as he said, "That's all for today's conference. Dismissed." Brent followed behind Richard with furrowed brows, and asked, "Great Elder, are we really going to invite that old bastard Crassus?" The opening of the Magic Caster Conference by Crassus has always been a tradition. "If we don't even send an invitation, it'll make us look petty." Richard walked as he said, "As for whether he'll come or not, with his personality, I'm afraid he won't come even if he finds a good disciple." Brent nodded with a thoughtful expression. Richard suddenly stopped in his tracks, and turned to Brent as he said, "By the way, His Majesty has decreed that 2 great magic casters from our Magus Tower will accompany the first prince to Chaos City. I plan to send you and Elliot, and we'll set off tomorrow morning. Go south with the first prince." Brent faltered upon hearing this. He looked around, and lowered his voice as he asked, "Does the second prince know about this?" Richard replied with a serious expression, "This is an order from His Majesty, so it doesn't matter whether Josh is aware of it or not. You're going to bring Princess Vanessa back to the palace, and ensure the safety of the princess and the first prince is your top priority. Princess Vanessa is in Chaos City." Brent was a little surprised, but he quickly composed himself at the sight of Richard's serious expression. He nodded with a serious expression, and said, "All right, I'll be sure to complete the escort mission." What a dashing pair of lovebirds. One moment, they're in the Wind Forest, the next moment, they're in Chaos City, and the next moment, they're in the Twilight Forest. Heh! Ha ha ha! Josh sat in the pavilion at the center of the lake with a few unopened jugs of wine in his hands. The ground was littered with shattered porcelain, and he was looking at the lake with a slightly intoxicated expression on his face. In the corner of the pavilion, the 2 maids who were in charge of brewing the wine were leaning against each other, trembling in fear. They didn't dare to look Josh in the eye. The second prince was simply too terrifying in this state. A black shadow guard appeared in the pavilion at the center of the lake, and half knelt on the ground as he respectfully said, "Your Highness, a guest from the Twilight Forest has arrived. He said that he brought you something precious." "An orc from the Twilight Forest?" Josh frowned as he looked at that shadow guard, and asked, "What is it?" The shadow guard lowered his head, and said, "He doesn't want us to see it. He said that he can only give it to you." "Heh! Interesting." An interested smile appeared on Josh's face. He waved his hand, and said, "The 2 of you are dismissed. Bring that fellow here." That shadow guard hesitated, and said, "Your Highness, that orc is a little strange. Do you need me to make some preparations? This is Rodu, the second prince's residence. Is there anyone who dares to do anything to me here?" Josh smiled with disdain, and waved his hand. "Bring him here." Soon, a skinny orc with leopard prints on his face was brought to the pavilion at the center of the lake. He was holding a black stone box in his hands. He bowed slightly to Josh, and said in a hoarse voice, "Morris greets Your Highness." "What are you holding in your hands?" Josh asked as he looked at the stone box in the orc's hands with interest. "This item is extremely precious. It is not suitable for a third party to know about it." Morris didn't reveal it directly. Instead, he glanced at the shadow guard standing at the side. "Dismissed." Josh waved his hand. That shadow guard hesitated for a moment, but still chose to disappear from the pavilion at the center of the lake. "Tell me, what is that?" "Your Highness, have you heard of the massacre that happened in the Urba tribe 300 years ago?" A hoarse voice sounded in the pavilion at the center of the lake. No pop-up window. Chapter 1594. On the dragon island that was suspended in the air. In the majestic golden palace, the 10 giant dragons each stood in one direction, and the atmosphere in the hall was rather tense. The giant dragons that represented the top 10 giant dragon tribes, the top 10 giant dragon powerhouses that stood at the top of this world, were gathered in one hall at the moment. Is the news from the Twilight Forest reliable? Do devils really exist in this world? Lorenzo, the chief of the Flaming Dragon tribe, asked loudly. His tone was filled with disbelief. Irina used the holy light to kill the evil that possessed Isaiah's son, and purified him into nothingness together with him. That was the scene that everyone at the scene saw. There were many doubts about the massacre of the Urba tribe back then, and we also found the aura of evil from the traces left behind at the scene. That was why we didn't execute Rex, and instead locked him up in the Bastille prison. If what Rex said was true, the devil's tentacles would have already extended to this world, and we know nothing about them. Douglas's cold voice sounded, and the hot air became much colder. We giant dragons are the most powerful race in this world. We were born to be the kings of the sky. Even if devils really exist, what's there to be afraid of? Eustace, the great elder of the Amethyst Dragon tribe, who was covered in light purple amethyst scales, said with disdain. Isn't it too ridiculous to gather the top 10 giant dragon tribes together for such a small matter? I still have an appointment with the Titan King for a fight. If there's nothing else, I'll take my leave first. Isaiah, the chief of the Tyrant Dragon tribe, stood up suddenly, and turned to walk out of the hall. If devils really exist in this world, I'm afraid this matter isn't as simple as we think. Right then, the chief of the Golden Dragon tribe, who had been silent all this while, said, I found a giant mural in the forbidden tomb of the Golden Dragon Island. It was left behind by our ancestors. All these years, I never understood what it was trying to express, but I should bring you all to see it today. A mural left behind by our ancestors? All the giant dragons were surprised to hear that. Even Louis, who was about to reach the door, stopped in his tracks. Dragons had a long lifespan, so they did not need to rely on words or murals to leave any traces. There was enough time for them to pass down their legacies orally. However, the Golden Dragon Island, which was the birthplace of the dragon race, actually had murals left behind by their ancestors. Moreover, even Louis, who was the oldest and most knowledgeable among the dragons, couldn't understand it. That piqued the interest of the other WMS. Let's go. Louis got up, flapped his wings, and disappeared from the hall. The other dragons left as well. After a while, the dragons appeared in a dark and huge cave. A huge mural that was 1,000 meters long and over 500 meters wide appeared in front of them. This was a grand project that only a dragon could accomplish. Even the leaders of the giant dragon tribe were surprised to see such a huge mural under the ground. I didn't expect there to be such a mural under the Golden Dragon tribe. But what is it about? Lauren opened his mouth and spat out a string of fireballs. The fireballs flew out and hovered in front of the mural about 100 meters away. The panoramic view of this magnificent mural hidden deep underground was truly displayed in front of everyone. It was chaos. What entered everyone's eyes was only a scene of chaos. This was a complete painting. There were countless races on it, as well as countless strange scenes. WMS were biting and killing each other. Forest trolls were twisting off the heads of their companions with half an elf in their mouths. Goblins with red eyes were riding on orcs and chasing after a group of monkeys. The endless sea realm was dyed red with blood. Countless corpses of demons were floating on the surface of the sea, and they were being torn apart and eaten by a group of terrifying fish. There were also many races that they had never seen before that were killing each other and slaughtering other races, and in the center of the mural, there was an indescribable object that was as huge as a small mountain. The WMS were as tiny as mosquitoes in front of it. Countless tentacles reached out from the hexagonal seal above its head. Those tentacles were filled with red eyes that flickered with a demonic glow as if they were about to break out of the seal. The expressions of all the dragon bigwigs changed when they saw this scene. What is this thing? Lauren, who was standing in front of that indescribable object, took a step back instinctively. The strange yet impactful scene left all the giant dragons in awe. If there are unknown and terrifying demons in this world, this might be it, Louis said calmly. Louis stepped forward and said in a steady voice, "This mural dates back to a much earlier time than the records and inheritance of our giant dragon tribe. Furthermore, this time period has to be counted in the tens of thousands of years. However, in the inheritance of our giant dragon tribe, there is nothing about this mural at all. Hence, I once thought that this was the imagination of one of our ancestors. Various races are at war with each other, and even killing each other. Could this really be a record of a race war in ancient times? Eustace asked with a frown. No, this is more like the scene that Rex described when the Urba tribe was controlled by the demons and killed each other, Douglas said solemnly. Douglas looked at the mural with a solemn expression, and solemnly said, "Racial wars are not like this. WMS would not attack their own kind in such a frenzy. No race would attack their own kind in such a frenzy, let alone the elves. Isn't this just a mural? Why are you so nervous?" Isaiah pursed his lips, and smilingly said, "Perhaps one of our ancestors had nothing better to do, so he deliberately painted this to scare us." No, I think Douglas is right. This mural should be a warning left behind by our ancestors. 3 years ago, there was an anomaly underground. That's when I discovered this hidden crypt and the only mural in the crypt. In just 3 years, a suspected demon appeared in the Twilight Forest. There must be an inseparable relationship between the two. Louis walked forward, and his golden eyes stared at the indescribable object that had a huge octopus head, a human body, and huge wings. This fellow was probably sealed somewhere by our ancestors back then. Now, it has begun to extend its tentacles and affect our world again. How is that possible? You said that this mural has existed for tens of thousands of years. What can live for so long? Even us WMS can only live for 3,000 years, Lorenzo questioned. Look at the words in the corner. Louis' golden eyes landed on the corner. There was a line of words written in the ancient WMS language. Eternal slumber may not be death. Lauren read in a trembling voice. Chapter 1595. Meg had a good dream. Everything was possible in the dream. Then, the alarm went off. Meg reached out to turn off the alarm and looked at the beauty sleeping in the crook of his arm. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly. Tumpage, I knew it. Father must be hugging mother to sleep instead of hugging Xiao Mai to sleep. A soft voice came from beside the bed. Meg turned around stiffly and saw Amy standing beside the bed with her arms crossed and an aggrieved look on her face. He smiled awkwardly and said, "Amy, listen to me. Last night, we both drank too much, and then, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. Anyway, if I don't get 2 strawberry ice creams, I won't be happy." Amy turned her face away and said proudly, "Oh, in order to compensate my little princess, I can only make a delicious breakfast for her." Meg gently pulled his slightly numb hand away and got out of bed. He tucked in the corner of the blanket and picked up a clean chef's suit. He squatted down and pinched Amy's nose and said with a smile, "Come, give father a kiss. If you kiss me, you have to add an ice cream." Amy stole a glance at Meg and said proudly, "Okay, I'll add it for you, but you can only have ice cream in the afternoon and evening." Meg smiled and nodded. Mewer. Amy hugged Meg's neck and kissed his cheek. She said happily, 3 ice creams. Okay, 3. You can have any flavor you want. Meg smiled contentedly and rubbed Amy's head. He got up and walked out of the door to change in the bathroom. Last night, perhaps they had underestimated the strength of the rum and red wine, so they were all drunk. Then, probably nothing happened. Although they were lying on the same bed, their clothes were not disheveled. However, he didn't know how he changed into his pajamas. Drinking messes up things. Drinking messes up things. Meg muttered regretfully as he brushed his teeth. "Mother, are you awake?" Amy asked softly as she lay on the edge of the bed and looked at Irina, who was sleeping like a beauty. Irina opened her eyes and looked at Amy with her clear blue eyes. She smiled and said, "Amy, how did you know I was awake?" "I just saw you smile," Amy said with a smile. She took off her shoes and snuggled into Irina's arms. She closed her eyes comfortably and said, "I've chased father away, so this place belongs to me now. I want to go back to sleep." Irina wrapped her arms around Amy and smiled even more affectionately. However, she still smiled and said, "Don't you like your father more?" "Who said so? I like both of them very much." Amy shook her head and then reached out to touch Irina's belly. She said expectantly, "Will you give birth to a little sister for me to play with?" "A little sister?" Irina's body stiffened slightly and she said with a strange expression, "Do you want a little sister, Irina?" Yes, I like little sisters very much." Amy nodded and said regretfully, "Palmer's little sister, Chris, is super cute, but she's someone else's little sister. It's not very convenient to play with her." "How can you say play with her? You should say play with her." Irina couldn't help but laugh. If having a little sister isn't for playing with her, then what's the point? Amy was puzzled. Irina thought for a moment. She seemed to have said something similar when she was pregnant with Amy. Why does this sound so familiar? For example, we can dress her up as a beautiful little princess, bring her to beat up bad guys, teach her how to play with fire. In any case, if we have a little sister, it'll definitely be super fun. Amy looked at Irina expectantly. Looking at the little girl's expectant expression and pure gaze, Irina found it difficult to refuse. However, that guy was really a blockhead. He really got her drunk last night. Even if she wanted to give birth to a little sister for Amy, it wasn't something she could do alone. Moreover, with so many things happening now, enemies all over the world, and the evil god watching them closely, she didn't dare to let herself fall into a weakened state again after being pregnant for 3 years. If Amy wants a little sister, then you'll have to wait a little longer. When mother's belly gets bigger, you'll have a little sister, Irina said with a smile as she looked at Amy. Your belly is getting bigger. Amy touched Irina's flat belly, leaned forward, and whispered, "Little sister, grow up quickly. Big sister is waiting for you outside." Gurgle tilde hey. Mother, listen. She's responding to me. Amy's eyes lit up as she exclaimed in surprise. Ah. Yes, at the crack of dawn, there was already a long line in front of Amy's. Most of them were middle-aged men. Drinking is the hobby of many men. Some people can exchange drinks in high-end restaurants, while others can gather together and drink at a table with wine from a small winery. With a bit of drunkenness, the world will become gentler and cuter, a drunk middle-aged man said confidently. That's enough. Madam said that if you don't go back today, you don't have to go back in the future, a waiter beside him said helplessly as he supported his swaying body. This woman, who is she trying to scare? Who's the head of the house? I'm a man, Master, Madam is the head of the house, the waiter reminded him. I'll go back now. That man flung the waiter's hand away, and walked towards the horse-drawn carriage with light steps. After taking a few quick steps, he turned back to look at his companion, and said, "Hey, help me taste if it's really Master Old Sim's handiwork. Ask the boss to leave me a bottle." "All right, you'd better go back quickly. Otherwise, you won't even have money for your alcohol next time." His companion chuckled as he watched him leave. He leisurely said, "If it's really Master Old Sim's handiwork, why would he leave it for you, 15 years old?" Old Sim's rum. 1,000 copper coins for a glass. This news exploded in the small circle of Chaos City's rum drinkers last night. Those who knew what it meant would naturally know what it meant. Someone was using an extremely precious work of art to do charity by the roadside. Rum that was more than 15 years old was only supplied to the chief and a few nobles in the Fork tribe. It was very rare for it to flow out, and the probability of it flowing to Chaos City was even lower. But this time, someone was actually selling 15-year-old rum brewed by Master Old Sim in the restaurant, and it was acknowledged by a few rather famous drinkers in the circle. That was why there were these middle-aged men lining up at the restaurant's entrance early in the morning. I heard this mammoth has a lot of rules. They only sell breakfast in the morning. I wonder if we can get the rum this morning. We've been lining up for so long. How can he not sell it when he's running a business? Isn't he ruining his own reputation? Yes, 15-year-old rum. Maybe there won't be any left the next time we come. We have to get him to sell us a glass this morning no matter what. Everyone was discussing fervently at the restaurant's entrance. Chapter 1596. Why are there so many people so early in the morning? And there are so many bottles and cans in their hands. Are they here to cause trouble? Hannah followed MIA and the rest to the restaurant early in the morning. She was shocked to see the long line at the entrance and those men holding all kinds of containers in their hands. Yeah, they are all unfamiliar faces. Usually, if they are not regulars, they wouldn't line up so early for breakfast. MIA was also puzzled when she saw this scene. Elizabeth frowned slightly. She glanced at the bottles and cans in their hands, and coldly said, judging from the smell of alcohol on them, they should be here for the rum. Seems like the reputation of Hannah's rum has already spread. It's true that good wine fears no dark alleys, MIA said with a smile. Hannah was a little smug when she heard that. It seemed like rum did have a huge audience in Chaos City. However, she soon worriedly said, but, didn't the boss say that they don't sell alcohol in the morning? Then yeah. Alcohol is not sold in the morning. Yarbemia nodded, and quickly walked to the stairs at the entrance of the restaurant. She looked at the people in the line, and smilingly said, "Hello, I am a service staff member at Mamis. I would like to kindly remind the customers who are here for the first time that Mamis only provides fried dough sticks, soy milk, Yangju fried rice, and other breakfast items during its morning operating hours. Alcohol, spicy grilled fish, roast beef kebabs, and other food items are not available. Please be aware. They don't sell alcohol in the morning." The customers who were waiting for the restaurant to open to buy alcohol were in an uproar when they heard that. Most of them were here for the first time at Mamis. They had heard of this restaurant before, and only knew that there were many rules and queues, but they didn't expect that the menu would change for 3 meals a day. An old man went up to Yarbemia, and earnestly said, "Miss, many of us are here for the first time, and don't know the restaurant's rules. We came here for the rum this morning, and have been standing in the cold wind for almost an hour. Why don't you make an exception for us and let us have a drink?" "That's right. We came here this morning to drink rum, but now you're telling us that it's not for sale. Aren't you playing with us?" A fat and strong man who reeked of alcohol said impatiently, "That's right, sell us a cup. If it wasn't for this glass of wine, who would be willing to line up so early in the morning?" A skinny monk-like man stomped his feet, sniffing his red nose as he complained, "Also, since you're all here, quickly open the door and let us in. How can you do business like this?" The crowd pushed and shoved each other forward, as if they were about to rush into the shop. "Rules are meant to be obeyed." A cold voice sounded out, and the ground was instantly covered in frost. The already cold weather instantly dropped by a lot, making everyone feel as if they had fallen into an ice cave. What surprised everyone even more was that their feet were firmly stuck to the ground by the frost, unable to take even half a step forward. Everyone looked at the frosty beauty walking up the stairs and looking at them coldly. They subconsciously wanted to avoid her gaze, not daring to meet her eyes. No matter who you are, or what reason you have to abide by the rules of Mamis here. Otherwise, you will be blacklisted and will no longer be allowed to enter the restaurant. Elizabeth's gaze swept across the faces of the customers, and said in a cold voice, "If there is anyone who forcefully violates the rules, you will be seen as an enemy of the restaurant." Everyone subconsciously swallowed their saliva. Although this frosty beauty was beautiful, her aura was equally strong and terrifying. She should be a powerful ice magician. Some people who were still hungover were frozen by the frost. They shivered and immediately sobered up. Everyone realized one thing. This shop was different from those restaurants that worshipped them like gods. Their usual sense of superiority would not work here. Wow, big sister Elizabeth is so cool. Hannah looked at Elizabeth with sparkling eyes. As a weak orc, she envied this kind of powerful big sister the most. She could suppress those troublemakers by herself. She was not afraid of anyone at all. "It's so cold, and we can't drink any alcohol. How tiring is it to line up? There's still more than half an hour before the restaurant opens. Why don't we go home and hug our wives to sleep on a hot brick bed?" Harrison reminded from behind as he rubbed his hands. "Yes, let's go home. It's too cold." Everyone immediately found a way out after hearing that. More than half of the customers carrying bottles and jars left immediately. The long line in front of the restaurant was more than halved. Bye-bye, all of you. Harrison smiled as he walked to the front row. He had come early in the morning to eat soy milk and youtiao, but he did not expect to see such a group of drunkards in front of him. If they did not leave, who knew how long they would have to wait in line? The regulars who came for breakfast also took their places one by one. The originally tense atmosphere quickly became relaxed. Many customers even greeted Yarbemia and the rest. Elizabeth waved her hand, and the frost on the ground disappeared instantly. The air also returned to normal. Although it did not become warmer, at least the area did not become colder. Yarbemia nodded at everyone with a smile. She knocked on the door, and the door opened. Everyone went in. Miss Elizabeth's aura is really strong. Even if we come to the restaurant every day, we still don't dare to greet her. This kind of ice beauty can only be admired from afar. Don't even think about getting close to her. If not for this, she wouldn't be able to suppress those drunkards who don't know who they are after drinking. The customers laughed as they discussed, and the atmosphere gradually became lively. It was definitely true love to wake up early and line up outside the restaurant for breakfast on a winter day like this. Meg walked out of the kitchen with a tray, and smiled as he saw Mia and the rest enter, and said, "It's quite lively so early in the morning. Hannah's rum is too popular." Many customers came because they heard about it, but they didn't know the restaurant's rules, so they made a small commotion. However, they were very cooperative and left first, Mia said with a smile. "I didn't expect there to be so many people who like to drink rum in Chaos City," Hannah said with a surprised expression. "That's because the local rum in Chaos City is too lousy, and the rum you brewed is the best in the rum. This is the so-called dimensionality reduction. This situation will probably continue to ferment," Meg said without any surprise. Some customers who didn't know about rum before would mostly fall into the trap after tasting it. Then, they would bring more of their friends to join the trap, and spread like a virus on the tables. They relied on the quality of all the other rum in the market and the excellent reputation to establish a foothold in Chaos City very quickly. "We have to hurry up with the matters regarding the brewery," Meg said to Hannah with a smile. Chapter 1597. After the morning service, Meg took Hannah upstairs and began the formal drawing lesson. As a pseudo-designer who had graduated from a proper mechanical design major, Mag's foundation in design was very solid. With his good memory, he could still remember how his teacher had taught him the basics of drawing designs. So many books. When Hannah entered the study, she was attracted by the 3 walls that were almost filled with all kinds of books. At a rough glance, there were at least 5,000 books of all kinds. She had never seen so many books in her life. Mag pointed at the bookshelf near the door with a smile, and said, "Apart from this bookshelf, you can take whatever books you want to read on the other bookshelves." Reading more books was a good thing. Hannah glanced at the bookshelf that Mag was pointing at. There were many books with black and red covers on the bookshelf, and they seemed to be emitting some kind of dark aura. She nodded without thinking too much about it. "Come over here. Today, I'm going to teach you how to draw a design in a standard manner so that your design can be gradually presented on the drawing so that more professional craftsmen can create products that meet your requirements." Mag walked over to the desk by the window. "Aren't we going to do it ourselves?" Hannah followed and asked with some doubts. She felt that others might not understand what she was going to do. "Our goal is to make standardized brewing equipment. Except for the mixing, which is done by you, the other processes can be done by machines and standardized workers. Only in this way can it be considered a large-scale mechanized brewery." Meg took a piece of white paper from the shelf and put it on the desk. He looked at Hannah and said, "So, we have to ensure the precision of the machine. This is a job that can only be done by professional blacksmiths." "Oh." Hannah nodded thoughtfully and looked at Meg with some worry. "Will it be difficult? In the past, I used to draw whatever I wanted. As long as I could understand it, it would be fine. It doesn't matter. I am a professional." Mag gestured for Hannah to sit at the side with a profound expression before he sat down in front of the desk, and said, "Let's take a look at the tools that are commonly used for drawing. This is a pencil and eraser, and this is a ruler." Mag began to teach Hannah the steps and methods of standardized drawing in an in-depth and simplified manner, starting from knowing the tools. Planar plan, 3D plan, 3D plan. One after another unfamiliar words leaped into Hannah's mind. Looking at the vivid drawings under Meg's pen and the neat and comfortable labeling method, she felt as if she had opened the door to a new world. The boss was indeed a master mechanic. However, Meg spoke too quickly, and the amount of information was too much. Although she had already tried her best to memorize it, and even took out a small notebook to record some key points, it was obviously unrealistic to want to completely grasp these things in a short period of time. She could only slowly digest and practice it when she was alone. About an hour later, Meg picked up the teacup beside him and took a sip of tea to moisten his dry throat. He looked at Hannah, who was in a daze, and asked, "Can you do it now?" Hannah looked at Meg in a daze. Is this a human language? Although she understood everything Meg said, this and understanding were two different things. "It's okay. As a professional teacher, I'll point out where I don't know." Meg smiled and extended his middle finger. Moments later, the dazed Hannah regained her clarity. She looked at Meg, who was sitting opposite her, in disbelief, and said in surprise, "Boss, I know it all." "No, it's just that your brain has already grasped it. Drawing is something that requires constant practice. You can stay in the study today and draw all the drawings that I've prepared for you." Mag stood up and gave his seat to Hannah before he went downstairs. "Isn't this too miraculous? The boss just pointed at my forehead, and I actually learned everything that he taught this morning. This is too incredible." Hannah still couldn't calm down. Just now, she actually learned everything that Meg taught her in her mind in a short period of time, including how to use various tools, how to draw professional drawings, and how to mark the appropriate measurements. Could this be the boss's superpower? Hannah was in deep thought. She felt that she had discovered the boss's superpower outside of cooking. Calm down, it's time to start drawing." Hannah took a deep breath and tried to calm herself down. Then, she picked up the pen and paper and started to complete the task that Meg gave her. Although it was her first time using professional tools to draw, she had already memorized all the methods and steps in her mind. Her technique was a bit rough, but it didn't affect her drawing the lines and drawings on the paper. Not bad, but it's not professional enough. 10 minutes later, Hannah looked at the first drawing she drew and nodded in satisfaction. Then, she threw it aside in dissatisfaction. She took the second piece of paper and started drawing seriously again. Not long after Meg went downstairs, Dykus came to find him with Michael's order to go to the City Lord's castle. Meg could roughly guess why Michael was looking for him. He changed his clothes and put the stone box with the strange stone statue in it on his body. Then, he got into Dykus' carriage and headed to the City Lord's castle. As soon as Meg arrived at the secret room, Michael stood up and said sincerely, "Mr. Mac, I have to apologize to you about Miss Rayner first. This matter will be completely resolved in a few days. There are some parasites in the City Lord's castle. I need to clean them up carefully. I'm not the one who was hurt. Your apology won't help." Meg shrugged. He was indeed a bit unhappy about the City Lord's castle. "I'll personally apologize to Miss Rayner later." Michael nodded. "Let's put these things aside for now. Let's talk about the evil gods and devils first," Roland said in a low voice as he closed the secret room's door and activated multiple anti-spying spell formations. "Mr. Mac, did you really see the devils on your trip to the Fork tribe this time?" Michael asked Meg. "I believe the City Lord has already seen the detailed report and my previous conversation. Perhaps it's a little ridiculous, but we have to admit that there really are devils in this world. Or rather, it's a kind of powerful existence that existed in ancient times but has survived until now. I call them the Great Old Ones," Meg said in a low voice. "Great Old Ones." Michael repeated each word slowly. His brows were tightly knitted together as he perplexedly asked, "If there really are Great Old Ones, Why haven't there been any records of them in the history of the Norland continent? Meg thought for a while, and said, I've been thinking about this problem recently. There are two possibilities. 1. The Norland continent was once completely destroyed, and the current world slowly developed after that, so there are no relevant records. 2. The Norland continent's history has been altered by someone, and all the information related to the Great Old Ones has been erased. Chapter 1598. The secret chamber suddenly became quiet. Michael and Roland were deep in thought. Meg didn't say anything, either. He might know a little more than the two of them, but he still couldn't be sure if his judgment was correct. If it's the former, then the previous world was completely destroyed under the scourge of the Great Old Ones. There was a very long gap in the world's civilization, and then it took a long time to develop to what it is now. Michael frowned, and said, But, can those fellows really live for so long? If their strength is already strong enough to destroy the world, I don't think it's hard to understand how they can live through this long period of time in some way. Meg calmly said, Moreover, the various races are like leeks to them. They cut them up again and again. That's true. Michael opened his mouth, but he was actually speechless. If there's a complete gap in the inheritance, then who did this? If it's the ancestors of the various races, knowing that there are terrifying demons, shouldn't they warn their descendants? Roland raised his own doubts. The giant dragons believe in the dragon god, the demons believe in their own demon gods, the orcs believe in the beast god, and the elves believe in the god of life. Almost all the races have their own gods, forming a strong belief system. Let's assume that the strength of these gods is determined by their belief. The Great Old Ones became strong by controlling the various races to believe in them, and the evil gods have very powerful means to bewitch people. They can easily corrupt and control those who have flaws in their minds. The best way to read the Norland continent of the Great Old Ones is not to let everyone be on guard against them, but to completely forget them, and then cut off the connection with them. Therefore, the gods of the various races might have wiped out all the records and memories related to them on the Norland continent after sealing the Great Old Ones. Meg frowned slightly, and said, These are all my deductions. Most of the gods of the various races only exist in legends. Although they can receive some supernatural gifts, I can't make a definite judgment as to whether they are really gifts from the gods. Michael shook his head, thought for a while, and said, As for the power of faith, if the gods really exist, then perhaps they really do exist. Otherwise, there wouldn't be the phenomenon of all races worshipping gods. Of these two inferences, if it's the latter, at least each race still has the protection of the gods. But if it's the former, how should we deal with the Great Old Ones who have already begun to stir? That's the most difficult thing, Roland said with a frown. Regardless of which one it is, the most important thing for us to do now is to immediately end the possible struggle between the various races, alert the entire continent of the Black Fog's appearance, and find a way to completely kill the Great Apocalypse Dominator, or impose a more complicated and sturdy seal on it, Meg said with a serious expression. Michael and Lauren both nodded. Just as Meg said, this was what they could do for now. This is the stone statue that Lex gave me. It was obtained from the Urba tribe back then. It should be the evil god that the Urba tribe worshipped back then. Meg took out the stone statue from the stone box and placed it on the table. Why would this thing that is so ugly and disgusting become the Urba tribe's totem of faith? Michael glanced at the stone statue, and only felt a tinge of frustration rising in his heart. He quickly averted his gaze. That's exactly why it's so strange. If the tragedy of the Urba tribe spreads to the entire Norland continent, then it will definitely be a tragedy in the human world. Meg kept the stone statue. Its appearance made the secret chamber become cold and eerie. The Grey Temple will raise the investigation of the Black Fog and the Great Old Ones to the highest level of authority. We will do our best to investigate and monitor it, Lauren said with a deep voice. Michael also said, the City Lord's castle will try to establish contact with all the races, and communicate with all the races about this matter. Before we have concrete evidence, I'm afraid it will be very difficult to completely stop the signs of struggle between the various races. All right, I will continue to pay attention to this matter too. If I think of anything, I will contact you in time. Meg nodded. The three of them had a short discussion about the black fog and the great old ones. However, they had too little information at the moment, so it was difficult for them to come up with anything substantial. However, the three of them still came to a consensus. They had to come up with convincing evidence before the peace talks between all the races so that all the races could gather together to fight against the common enemy that might appear. Mr. Mac, I heard you abducted the best brewer in the Fork tribe. Michael asked Meg with a smile after they left the secret chamber. I didn't abduct her. She did it willingly. Meg smiled at Lauren. Speaking of which, she's also an informant of the Grey Temple. However, given her abilities, it would be a waste for her to stay in the Fork tribe for the rest of her life. Hence, I asked for someone from Your Excellency Lauren. Old Sim is the Grey Temple's best informant in the Fork tribe. Mr. Mac made the Grey Temple suffer quite a loss. Lauren also had a smile on his face. Meg bade farewell, and Dykus personally sent him back to the restaurant. Michael lowered his voice as he looked at Lauren, and asked, the investigation from the Department of Property Rights? It's basically over. Judging from the results, you'll have to hire a lot of people again. Lauren took out a piece of parchment and handed it over. Michael unfolded the parchment and looked at it seriously for a while. His face darkened, and he only put it down after a while. He angrily said, these fellows are really greedy. They really think they're officials just because they have some power in their hands. They made the Department of Property Rights into such a mess right under my nose. These can be found out through investigation. As for the more well-hidden transactions, the Grey Temple can also dig them out if there's a need. Lauren appeared rather calm. It's not just the Department of Property Rights. The Marquis family has really spent a lot of money and effort to operate it all these years. They must have treated the City Lord's castle as their own. They can produce whatever evidence they want, Michael said with a frown. Because of Bennett, many of the Marquis family's businesses have started to drift between the black and white sides. If there's a need to clean them up, we can hurt them anytime. Then do a proper investigation. If we don't let Bowen suffer, he might forget who he is, Michael said with a cold expression. The warehouse happened to be a little empty recently. Developing steam locomotives is a very expensive thing. I'll get them to start an investigation on the Marquis family when we get back. Lauren nodded slightly. Minister, are you satisfied with the beauties that I sent to your house last night? Bowen asked with a smile as he looked at the middle-aged man who was surrounded by two beauties in a luxurious private room. Millimeterham, they taught me well. The middle-aged man nodded with satisfaction. His hands moved restlessly up and down the two beauties in his arms. Bowen smirked. He looked at the man, and continued, then, the final verdict on Bennett's properties and businesses, I'll give you the approval tomorrow. The middle-aged man waved his hand, and his gaze landed on Bowen. He narrowed his eyes, and smiled. Same old rules. You get 70%, and I get 30%. Chapter 1599. Father, what's Sir Dominic's attitude? Jonah asked Bowen, who was sitting opposite him in the horse-drawn carriage. That old thing. As long as there are women and money, there's nothing he can't handle. Bowen pursed his lips in disdain. But he asked for 30% in cash. We have to calculate the value of these properties when we get back, and then prepare the money. We'll go to the Department of Property Rights tomorrow morning to hand in the money and get the ruling. We've estimated the value of these properties to be around 1 billion copper coins. Sir Dominic is asking for too much this time, Jonah said with a frown. Bennett's matter is a little complicated. If we're not careful, we might be implicated. If we follow the legal procedures flawlessly, these properties will naturally belong to us. Bowen smiled and said to Jonah, this is called spending money to avoid disaster. It's unavoidable. Besides, with this money, that old thing Dominic will be in the same boat as us. Even if something happens in the future, he will have to help us. Jonah nodded thoughtfully. Sir Dominic was a high-ranking official in the City Lord's castle, and he was directly in charge of property rights. With his endorsement, this matter would definitely be settled. Although they had to fork out an extra 300 million copper coins, the 700 million copper coins would definitely land in their pockets. No wonder Father was so calm earlier. "Father, what about that hot pot restaurant?" Jonah asked. "Of course, it's still within the scope of recovery. Dominic can get 8 million copper coins from there. He's not someone who would let the meat in his mouth fly away," Bowen said with a smile. Jonah hesitated, and said, "But Father, that hot pot restaurant might be related to the Grey Temple. I think it's safer not to claim the ownership of the hot pot restaurant for the time being. We'll wait until Bennett's matter is settled, and all the charges are cleared, and we figure out how Miss Rayner got that hot pot restaurant before we make a decision. Jonah, if you want to be the head of the family, you have to be bold enough." Bowen looked at Jonah, and seriously said, "The Department of Property Rights is in charge of property rights. What right does the Grey Temple have to interfere? If you're hesitant about something that's in the bag, how can you be the head of a big family?" "Yes," Jonah replied with his head lowered. Although there were still doubts in his eyes, he didn't continue arguing. In Chaos City, the City Lord's castle was in charge of government affairs, while the Grey Temple was in charge of punishment and defense. Under normal circumstances, the Grey Temple would indeed not interfere in government affairs. However, he was still a little worried. He couldn't help but think of the boss of Amy's. He felt that the matter wouldn't be resolved so easily. Rodu, the flying steed landing pad outside the royal palace. Sean stood in front of a majestic giant golden eagle, and looked at the dozens of people who came with him. He loudly said, "This time, I'm visiting Chaos City on behalf of the Empire. I hope we can complete the mission that His Majesty has given us." Half of these people were from the military, and there were even 2 10th-tier generals among them. The other half were civil officials who were responsible for the negotiations, and there were also 8 magic casters from the Magus Tower led by Brent and Elliot. Sean was also a little perplexed as to why his father would arrange for 2 great magic casters to accompany him on this trip. After all, Josh had been in the Magus Tower for many years, yet he was now bringing 2 great magic casters to Chaos City. However, this was not a bad thing for him. The one who should be having a headache was Joshua. Everyone smiled and complimented Sean before boarding the giant golden eagles and flying to Chaos City. It was a tradition for different races and regions to visit each other. Other than a few races that couldn't get along with each other completely, all the other races would still visit each other to maintain their basic friendship. However, there had never been such a big entourage like this in the past. The first prince was leading the team personally, and there were 2 10th-tier knights and 2 10th-tier magic casters. It was really rare. Everyone could vaguely guess. After all, Alex had been appearing in Chaos City recently, and his relationship with the Empire was a little unpredictable. In order to protect the first prince, it was reasonable for them to be on the safe side. Today, the Roth Empire's diplomatic team will officially visit our Chaos City. The first prince of the Roth Empire will be leading the team, and there will also be 2 10th-tier knights and 2 great magic casters accompanying them. This is the highest level of diplomatic team in the past 10 years. We have to do a good job of receiving them and show Chaos City's style. Chaos City's Foreign Affairs Department had already started the preparations for the reception. They still had to coordinate the City Lord's itinerary so that the Roth Empire's diplomatic team could meet the City Lord at the right time. Andre's diplomatic team this time is a little unusual. "Seems like he's still a little worried that Alex will do something to Sean," Michael said with a smile as he looked at the report sent by Dicus. Princess Vanessa and Duke Abraham are also in Chaos City. Apart from a routine visit, the Roth Empire's diplomatic team also has another purpose, which is to bring Princess Vanessa back. This princess is deeply doted on by King Andre. I'm afraid it has something to do with the fact that he sent 2 great magic casters, Dicus replied with a smile. "Speaking of which, my Princess Vanessa is quite fond of eating at Amy's. I wonder if Sean can bring her back." A strange smile appeared on Michael's face. Maybe he will be addicted to it too. Dykus didn't comment. When Meg returned to the restaurant, he went to Raina's hot pot restaurant to take a look. Tens of elves were modifying the restaurant's overall decoration. Adding wood and green embellishments in the large expanse of gold made the restaurant look less luxurious, and more refreshing and natural. This made the hot pot restaurant more suitable for the low-spending crowd. Choosing elven carpenters was indeed a very good decision. Meg nodded with satisfaction. "Boss, you're here." Raina came down from the second floor, and saw Meg standing in the middle of the main hall. She quickly walked up to him. "Millimeter. I was on my way back from some errands, so I came in to take a look." Meg nodded with a smile, and praised, "The decorations are pretty good. They are all very outstanding carpenters. The effect has completely exceeded my expectations." Raina nodded in agreement. The large expanse of gold gave her a headache, but after the elves' skillful modification, the hot pot restaurant now exceeded her expectations. "Oh, yes. Boss, I'm almost done with the first version of the hot pot soup. Can you try it for me?" Raina looked at Meg expectantly. "Oh, you've already decided on the first version?" Meg was also a little surprised to hear that, but he quickly nodded with a smile. "Of course. Do you want to go back to the restaurant, or do you want to do it here? I've already started using the kitchen upstairs. I've already prepared the first version of the hot pot soup. You just have to come upstairs with me." Raina led Meg upstairs. Wonderful bookhouse. Chapter 1600. There was a slightly smaller hall on the second floor of Raina's hot pot restaurant. There were dozens of tables in the hall, and there were sealed private rooms around the hall. The private rooms were labeled with simple numbers, and there were a total of 32 of them. As for the kitchen, it took up almost half of the space on the second floor. Although it was not as scientific as modern kitchens, this kitchen was already divided into sections. The washing area, cutting area, cooking area, and so on were all completely separated. The stoves used were also the most advanced magic stoves. This is what a big restaurant should be like. Meg stood at the door and looked at the kitchen that was several times bigger than his own restaurant. He could not help but feel emotional. "Boss, please sit here." Raina pushed a small dining cart out. There was a two-tone pot with red soup and clear soup. There were also all kinds of dishes on plates. There were vegetables, tripe, beef, and all kinds of dishes from Immerse. Furthermore, they were all very fresh. They must have been bought and prepared in the morning. Meg did not stand on ceremony, and sat down at the nearest hot pot table. These hot pot tables had been prepared beforehand. Unlike Immerse induction cooker, this one used a magic stove. One only needed to change the flammable stone regularly, and the temperature could be adjusted. The flammable stone was a commonly used heating fuel in this world. It was a type of black stone that was the size of a baby's fist and had a smooth surface like a pebble. It was a strange stone that could emit stable heat through the activation of a magic array. It was not expensive, and even an ordinary family could afford it. Using this magic stove to heat up hot pot was indeed a very good idea. Bennett was indeed outstanding in business. Meg had to admit that. At least this hot pot restaurant had successfully replicated Immerse by 70% to 80%. It only needed a talent like Raina to lead it, and the hot pot restaurant could become a machine that made money continuously. It was a pity that he did not manage to poach Raina. Instead, he had thoughts that he should not have. The soup pot was still hot. Raina placed the two-tone pot on the stove, and it began to boil after a short while. Only then did Meg focus his attention on the soup pot in front of him. There were quite a lot of dried chili and pepper floating on the surface of the red soup pot. The butter soup had a tempting color, and the soup base was stir-fried with various spices. The aroma of the soup base was a little pungent, but it also rushed over mercilessly, making it hard to resist. Meg sniffed carefully, closed his eyes, and thought seriously for a while. He did not know what spices Raina used, but it actually reached 70% to 80% of the soup base that he made. The remaining 20% to 30% should be due to the differences in spices. She did not leave it empty, but replaced it with other spices to make the spicy soup base different from the one he made. The fragrance of the spicy hot pot is very special. It is obviously different from the one I made, but it does not lose the spicy flavor. The specific taste can only be known after tasting it. Meg opened his eyes and said, and then his gaze fell on the clear soup pot next to him. The most important thing in the clear soup pot was whether the bone broth was boiled in place. Raina did not need to worry about this. The thick white soup base had already explained everything. However, in this soup pot, there were also green onions and a few red dried fruits. What is this? Meg picked up the chopsticks and picked up a dried fruit that looked a bit like a red date. This is a carder fruit. It is slightly sour and can improve the freshness. When we stew meat, we often add a few in it. It can make the soup thicker and more delicious, so I also added a few in the clear soup pot. It can make the monotonous soup pot richer in color. Raina explained. It is equivalent to replacing the roll of tomatoes, and it is not easy to cook. It is a very creative addition. Meg put the carder fruit back into the soup pot. In terms of appearance, this double-flavored soup pot, whether it was the red soup or the clear soup, had reached the level that made people want to try it. It was not inferior to Mammy's hot pot. In terms of fragrance, what made Meg gratified was that Raina had achieved innovation and differentiation, so that this hot pot restaurant would not be completely reduced to a low-quality version of Mammy's hot pot special area. Raina's face did not show too much joy. She put the dishes on the dining cart one by one on the table and said a little nervously, "Please taste it." "Okay, I'll try the clear soup pot first." Meg picked up a piece of fat beef with the chopsticks and rinsed it in the clear soup pot. The thin fresh beef had marble-like fat and quickly curled up in the boiling soup pot. Meg did not have time to let it grow old and lifted it out of the soup pot. In order to better taste the taste of the soup pot, Meg directly put the fat beef into his mouth without dipping it. The fat beef was tender and juicy. It was soft and smooth in the mouth. After it was boiled in the rich bone soup with a slight sour taste, it was even more delicious. Without any dipping sauce, the taste buds had been completely activated by the delicious and rich beef. After swallowing it, the taste of the meat in the mouth and teeth was endless. This should be the fat beef cut from the top of the head of the best yellow ox. A yellow ox weighing 1,000 pounds could only be cut out of 12 pounds of the top of the head of the cow. It could be said that it was extremely precious. Raina's attitude towards the ingredients made Meg quite gratified. She did not relax the control of the quality of the ingredients because of the position of the hot pot restaurant. Moreover, the carder fruit brought him a big surprise. The sour taste was not as sharp as the acetic acid, but a very mild sour taste. In this soup pot, it really had a very good effect of improving the freshness, even better than that of the tomatoes. Then Meg put a few cabbages and lotus slices into the pot. The cabbages became soft in a short while. Similarly, there was no dipping sauce. The cabbages in winter were the freshest and sweetest. Even if it was boiled in plain water, it could still be delicious. After it was boiled in the bone soup, the freshness and sweetness had been catalyzed to the greatest extent. It was the satisfaction of scalding the mouth. As for the lotus slices, Meg still chose to dip them in the dipping sauce that had just been prepared after tasting a mouthful of them. For this kind of existence that was difficult to be tasted, it still needed to be adjusted with the dipping sauce to really show its damn deliciousness. The clear soup hot pot becomes very special because of the existence of the carder fruit. The dipping effect is also very good. As long as it is matched with the personal dipping sauce, it can make the customers who have a light taste satisfied with the hot pot. Meg put down the chopsticks and looked at Raina seriously and commented, "Thank you." Raina's face finally bloomed with a smile. During this period of time, she had been thinking about how to make the seemingly simple clear soup hot pot rich with its own characteristics. Adding the carder fruit originally made her quite worried that Meg would reject it. She didn't expect to get such a high evaluation. "Now, let me try the red soup pot." Meg took off his coat, reached out to unbutton the top button of his shirt, rolled up his sleeves, and then made himself a special dipping sauce for the red soup hot pot. He picked up the chopsticks and was ready to officially start. Of course, the red soup pot should be eaten for the hot pot. Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 1601. The tripe bobbed up and down in the red broth, covered in bright red oil, before being fed into his mouth. The spicy broth exploded in the mouth like a pioneer, followed by the crispy tripe. It was as thin as a leaf, but it didn't have the slightest hardness or toughness when chewed. The crispy texture was intoxicating. Apart from the spiciness of the broth, the unique fragrance made Meg raise his eyebrows slightly. This difference gave the spicy hot pot a different kind of deliciousness, and it was a pleasant surprise. The different spices blended the flavors perfectly. They did not compete for the main flavor of the spicy hot pot, but they gave it a richer layer of flavor. He picked up a long duck intestine and dipped it into the hot pot. After a few dips, the duck intestine started to curl up. He rolled it in the dipping dish before putting it into his mouth. The perfect heat allowed the crispness of the duck intestines to be released perfectly. The fragrant and spicy red soup removed the fishy smell of the duck intestines and gave the duck intestines a wonderful taste. The sound of slurping and slurping almost made one want to chew their tongue. Half a spoonful of pig's brain had been cooked in the pot for a while. He bit it with a spoon and blew on it before stuffing it. The appropriate spiciness made his taste buds tense up, and then the pig's brain melted in his mouth. The tender texture was similar to tofu pudding, but the pig's brain was softer. The fragrant taste bloomed on the tip of his tongue, and together with the spiciness, it brought about a unique taste. The enoki mushrooms were added into the pot, and the lotus root slices were tossed up and down in the pot. Meg used the serving chopsticks to pick up the beef. He looked up at Raina, who was still standing nervously at the side, and said with a smile, "Don't just watch. Come, sit down and eat with us." Oh! Raina was stunned for a moment, but she still sat down opposite Meg and joined the group of people eating the hot pot. The hot and spicy hot pot dispelled the chill of winter. As the red broth boiled, it was a testament to the deliciousness. Meg wiped the sweat on his forehead and the red oil at the corner of his mouth with a tissue. He looked at Raina and said, "After the renovations are completed, we'll open for business right away after we find employees. If the soup base and ingredients can be maintained at this level, and the price is slightly lower than Mammoth's, the hot pot restaurant's business won't be bad." Red soup also passed. Raina looked at Meg in surprise, but she still tried to control her emotions. "Yes, your improvement is very successful. Even some flaws can't cover up its brilliance. This is a brand new spicy hot pot base. It has a unique taste, but it's still a delicious hot pot base," Meg nodded seriously and said. Raina's talent in identifying and recognizing spices once again shocked him. Finding such a suitable substitute in such a short time and determining the ratio to mix the finished hot pot base ingredient, he admitted that even he couldn't do it now. "Thank you." The smile on Raina's face finally bloomed completely. Her efforts over the past few days and nights were not in vain. Getting Meg's approval was more important than anyone else's. After all, he was the one who created the hot pot, and no one had more right to speak than him. In terms of recruitment, you can consider the elves. There should be many of Phyllis's clansmen who are unemployed now. Many of them are gifted. If they can be placed in suitable positions, it can greatly reduce the number of employees in the hot pot restaurant, and at the same time increase the overall work efficiency, Meg suggested. Because the factory in the north of the city hadn't been completed yet, there were still 20,000 night elves who were unemployed. Among them, there was no lack of 6th or 7th level elven magic casters. For example, a 5th level water elven magic caster's water drawing spell could take on the work of a dozen old aunties who were in charge of cleaning up, and do it better than them. Fewer employees could reduce the operating costs of the hot pot restaurant, and at the same time, improve the service quality in terms of space, and avoid the situation of personnel chaos. Let the elves be waitresses. Raina's eyes lit up, but soon showed some worry. Would the noble elves be willing to be waitresses in the hot pot restaurant? Would their salary be very high? You can ask Phyllis. Maybe it's not as expensive and difficult to recruit an elven employee as you think, Meg said with a smile. Okay. Raina nodded. She was indeed overthinking. She didn't know much about the situation, but she thought too much. I should go back. Although I'm full, I have to prepare lunch for them and get ready for business. Meg glanced at his watch. It was almost 11 o'clock. He got up and walked in the direction of the stairs as he said, I'll be in charge of the bone soup today. You can work in the restaurant first. It's okay to come to the restaurant later. Okay, then I'll have to trouble you. Raina looked at Meg's back and said, about the flour in the spicy hot pot, maybe you can try it again. Meg said without turning back. Flour. Raina's gaze fell on the red soup pot in front of her, which was almost half gone. She picked up the spoon and scooped up a spoonful of red soup to her nose. She closed her eyes and sniffed seriously. Her delicate eyebrows knitted together. Is there something extra or something missing? Why isn't Raina here today? Meg was in the kitchen making lunch for his people. MIA and the others arrived one after another. They looked around and wondered. She already had lunch. I just tried the new hot pot she developed in her restaurant. Because the taste was outstanding, both of them were full, Meg said with a smile. Raina is so outstanding. She completed the transformation of the hot pot base so quickly. Does that mean that the hot pot restaurant will be open soon? Mia asked in surprise. The others also looked at Meg with curiosity. The new hot pot restaurant was very big. It was many times bigger than Mammoth's. They were looking forward to it. Yes. As long as the renovation is completed and the staff recruitment is successful, we can open for business immediately. Meg nodded. The most time-consuming and labor-consuming renovation was nearing its end. I'm looking forward to it. I hope Raina's hot pot restaurant can show those cheap hot pot restaurants, but with poor quality control and taste, what a real cheap hot pot restaurant is. MIA said with an expectant look. It's still easy to beat them. Meg said in his heart. He was actually looking forward to the new hot pot restaurant. A restaurant with a capacity of 1,000 people. Even if the average consumption was 100 copper coins, the daily turnover should be able to easily exceed 200,000. This was a hen that laid golden eggs. Let's clear the table and get ready for lunch, Meg said to everyone as he turned off the fire and scooped the red braised pork from the casserole onto plates. After lunch, Irina asked Meg to go upstairs. Once she closed the door, she went straight to the point. Sean is coming to Chaos City. He's arriving today. Do you want to kill him? You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.